Hi guys, and welcome to History That Makes You Sleepy. Tonight, you arrive just a little too late. A thin layer of ash drifts slowly through the air, settling softly on your shoulders, light as snow, but warmer than it should be. You brush it away without thinking, only to notice how quiet everything is. No footsteps, no distant voices, not even the sound of wind. Just a stillness that feels unnatural. You take a slow breath and there is a faint bitter taste in the air. It lingers longer than expected. You pause, because something here does not quite make sense, and the more you notice, the clearer it becomes. If you were truly standing here, you would not have time to understand it. You probably would not survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to share your location and local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights flow straight into the story. You stand beneath a sky that cannot decide whether it belongs to winter or disaster. The air is pale, almost silver, but there is warmth hidden inside the falling ash, a strange softness that pretends to be snow while carrying the sour breath of burned timber, hot stone, and distant ruin. It settles in the folds of your sleeves, it rests on your eyelashes, it dusts the ground ahead of you until every footprint, every rut, every broken twig becomes part of the same quiet blanket. At first your mind tries to be reasonable, which is sweet of it. It tells you that ash is only ash, that silence is only silence, that surely there must be a road somewhere beneath this powdery surface. Human beings are very fond of surely. Surely the village is nearby. Surely the path continues beyond that dim line of trees. Surely someone else has noticed the sky going wrong. Surely, surely, surely. History is full of people saying surely right before nature clears its throat. You begin to walk. Each step makes almost no sound. The ash accepts your boots without complaint, puffing gently around your ankles. It is not yet the deep snowstorm, you fear not yet the blind, white fury that will erase direction completely. This is the strange beginning, the warning before the warning when the world still gives you just enough detail to make poor decisions with confidence. Ahead, the land slopes downward. Behind the place where you arrived is already blurring as though the air itself has a poor memory. The stillness presses close. No birds call, no dogs bark, no cartwheels creak from a road. In many parts of the past, silence is not peaceful. It is information. A silent settlement may mean everyone is sleeping or hiding or gone. A silent forest may mean weather is coming. A silent sky after falling ash may mean something far larger than you has already happened, and nobody remembered to invite you to the explanation. One mainstream historical fact sits heavily in this quiet people living near volcanoes, often described ashfall as a kind of unnatural snowfall, even in warm seasons. In the year 79, when Vesuvius erupted near Pompeii, and Herculaneum ash and pumice fell so thickly that daylight dimmed and roofs began to strain under the weight. You're not standing there exactly, not tied to one famous street or one famous date, but the sensation belongs to that long human memory, a sky shedding powder, the day turning strange, the body understanding danger before the mind has organized a proper lecture. You lift your hand and wipe your face. The ash smears faintly across your skin. It is gritty between your fingers, finer than sand, not cold enough to comfort you with normal winter logic. You taste bitterness again when you swallow. There's a dry feeling at the back of your throat, as if the air has been stored too long in a clay jar. You want water, but the nearest water is hidden, and hidden things are already becoming a theme. A few steps farther on, the ash gives way to true snow in patches. Real snow lies in shallow drifts along the low ground, tucked into the hollows and gathered against stones. It seems almost innocent beside the ash, clean, white, familiar. Yet the two powders mingle under your boots, grey and white, warm memory and cold present, and you realize that direction is not a thing you possess. Direction is a bargain between your senses and the world. You need marks, shadows, sounds, slopes, wind smell, and habit. Remove enough of them and you become a person walking through a blank page. Somewhere in the distance there might be a road. You can imagine it easily, a narrow track hardened by carts bordered by hedges, perhaps leading toward a town gate or a wayside shrine. Medieval travellers, Roman couriers, early modern farmers, indigenous traders, Arctic hunters, pilgrims, soldiers, refugees, and very unlucky tax collectors all depended on routes that could vanish under weather. A road was not always the grand paved thing your modern mind pictures. Sometimes it was only the place where enough feet had agreed to go before. Rather charming, really, until the snow deletes the agreement. You turn slowly searching for something fixed. A tree with a split trunk, a ridge, smoke from a chimney, the angled roof of a barn. Anything. But the ash thickens the air and the snow begins again, first as scattered grains, then as flakes, then as soft white scraps drifting sideways. The storm has not arrived with drama. It has entered like someone careful not to wake the house. There's a quirky old tidbit, almost too odd to be useful, that some travellers once believed volcanic ash or unusual coloured snow could carry omens, warnings, or even illness from troubled skies. In parts of Europe, red or dusty snow was sometimes discussed with a nervous mixture of natural observation and superstition. People blamed winds, divine displeasure, strange vapours, and because history enjoys being history, occasionally dragons. To be fair, if you're tired cold and watching the sky drop grey powder onto the earth, a dragon is not the least practical explanation anyone has ever offered. You keep moving because standing still feels worse. Your body chooses motion before your thoughts approve it. The soles of your boots scrape through layers of ash snow, frozen grass, and hidden stones. Once your foot catches on something buried, and you lurch forward, arms lifting in a small undignified gesture that no heroic painting would ever include. There you are, brave wanderer of history, nearly defeated by a root. Very noble, very educational. The air darkens by degrees. Not night, not quite. More like the day is being folded into cloth. You try to remember where the light was strongest when you first arrived. Was it behind you? To your left? The ashes made the sky too even, too dull, too without direction. The sun becomes a rumour. You listen for wind, but the wind is soft and confused, wandering among the trees without giving you a steady face to lean against. Historians still argue whether ordinary travellers in many pre-modern societies relied more on formal roads, local guides, seasonal landmarks, or inherited memory when weather turned dangerous. Written records love officials, armies, merchants, and disasters, but the quiet knowledge of common walkers often disappears. The shepherd who knew which hollow filled first with snow, the woman who could smell the marsh before seeing it, the child sent across fields with bread and a message. These people rarely left manuals, they left paths, and paths can vanish. You pass a low stone wall, or perhaps only a line of rocks pushed up from the soil, ashes gathered on each stone like pale flour. Snow fills the spaces between them. The wall might border a field or a ruined yard or nothing meaningful at all. You crouch and touch it. Cold stone beneath warm dust. The contrast unsettles you. You imagine hands placing these stones one by one, season after season, making order from rough ground. Now the storm softens that labour in an hour. A faint smell comes and goes. Smoke, but not the friendly kind from a hearth. This is sharper, emptier. It makes you think of timbers collapsed into coals of pottery, cracked by heat of fields dusted with what used to be roofs. You do not see flames, you do not see people, you only receive the afterthoughts. The snow thickens. It falls more steadily now, taking command from the ash. The flakes are larger than before, colder, wetter against your cheeks. They land on your shoulders and melt slowly where the ash has already warmed the cloth. A grey paste gathers along your cuffs. Your hair, your collar, your lashes all become part of the storm's little archive. If someone found you later, they might read these layers like a poor historian reads a damage page: ash first, then snow, then fear. You turn once more, trying to find your own footprints. For a moment they are visible behind you, shallow ovals in the powder, each one softening at the edges. Then a gust crosses the open ground. Not a loud gust, not a cinematic howl, just a steady breath across the surface. The prints blur, the ash lifts, the snow slides into the depressions. The world begins erasing your evidence, and you understand very quietly that the first danger is not the cold. Not yet. The first danger is not knowing which way you were facing when you still believed you knew. You turn back again, slower this time, as if moving too quickly might frighten whatever fragile sense of direction you still possess. The place where your footprints were just moments ago now looks undecided. Not gone entirely, not yet, but softened like a memory you're trying to recall while half asleep. Each step you made has become a suggestion rather than a fact. You step toward them anyway. It feels logical, retracing your path. People have always trusted the idea that going back is safer than going forward into the unknown, and sometimes that is true. But only when the world agrees to stay still long enough to let you return. Snowstorms, ashfall, drifting winds, these are not cooperative companions. They are editors, and you unfortunately are the rough draft. Your boot lands where you think your previous step had been. The ground dips slightly. Perhaps that is correct. Perhaps not. The next step is worse. The spacing feels off. You hesitate, staring down, trying to measure distance with your eyes alone. Already the snow has begun to lie to you, smoothing over irregularities, filling shallow impressions, turning certainty into guesswork. You pause. There is a quiet instinct in you now, something older than maps, older than language. It whispers that hesitation can be dangerous, but so can confidence. A delicate balance, really. History is full of people who paused too long and people who didn't pause enough. Neither group writes glowing reviews of the experience. The wind shifts again, gently but decisively. It slides across the ground, lifting ash in faint grey veils that drift sideways before settling again. The snow follows, obedient, filling gaps, erasing edges. You watch one of your clearest footprints blur in real time, the crisp outline softening until it becomes just another pale depression among many. And just like that, the last reliable line connecting you to where you came from begins to dissolve. You straighten, slowly scanning the horizon, or what passes for one now. The edges of the world are fading. Trees that once stood clearly at a distance now seem thinner, less certain, as if they might step away if you looked too directly at them. The ground slopes, but the slope feels inconsistent, like a trick of perspective. You turn your head, hoping to catch the angle of light, the direction of shadow, but there is no real shadow anymore. The sky has become an even indifferent brightness. This is how it happens. There is a well-known historical reality quietly repeated across centuries. Travellers caught in snowstorms often became disoriented within minutes, even on familiar routes. Accounts from alpine crossings, Arctic expeditions and rural winter journeys all echo the same detail once visibility drops and landmarks vanish. Even experienced people can lose their bearings astonishingly fast. Not because they are foolish, not because they lack skill, but because the environment removes the very tools they depend on. You take a breath, slow and careful, as if that might anchor you. The air feels colder now. The earlier warmth from the ash is fading, replaced by a sharper bite that slips through your clothing in thin, persistent threads. It finds the seams, first around your wrists, your collar, the place where your boots meet your legs. You shift your shoulders slightly, trying to settle your coat more tightly, but it is a temporary comfort. The cold is patient. It does not rush. It simply waits for you to run out of defences. You glance behind you once more. Nothing. Not emptiness exactly, just sameness. The ground behind you looks like the ground ahead of you and the ground to either side, a continuous field of pale, gently shifting texture. You could convince yourself that your path is still there, buried just beneath the surface. You could also convince yourself that it never existed. That is the trouble with snow. It allows multiple truths to coexist, at least for a while. You turn in a slow circle trying to orient yourself. Perhaps there was a tree line to your left earlier, or was it ahead? You remember a slight dip in the land, but dips are everywhere now. The more you think, the less certain you become. Your mind begins to replay recent moments, searching for something fixed, something reliable, but memory, like the landscape, is already shifting. There is an odd, almost charming historical tidbit that in some northern regions people once tied long threads or ropes between buildings during heavy snowstorms, creating physical guides to follow when visibility disappeared. A practical solution, really. Hold the line and you will not lose your way. Simple, effective, slightly humiliating perhaps, but far preferable to wandering in circles until the cold decides your fate. You do not have a rope. You do not have a building. You have only the vague impression that you were somewhere else not long ago and that somewhere else might have been safer. You begin to walk again, but now your steps are slower, more deliberate. You choose a direction not because you are certain, but because standing still feels like surrender. Your boots press into the snow deeper now as it accumulates. The ash beneath creates a strange resistance, a soft crunch, followed by a faint powdery slide. Step, another step. You listen carefully as if the world might offer guidance through sound. But there is nothing, no distant voices, no animal calls, no creaking branches or shifting carts, just the muted whisper of snow landing on snow, a sound so soft it barely qualifies as sound at all. You realize with a quiet unease that silence is not empty. It is full of everything you cannot hear, full of distances you cannot measure, full of possibilities you cannot confirm. You adjust your direction slightly, angling toward what you think might be a darker patch ahead. It could be trees, it could be a trick of light, it could be nothing at all. Still, it is something different, and difference feels valuable. As you move, your sense of time begins to loosen. Was it minutes since you last saw your footprints clearly, or longer? The storm has a way of stretching moments, smoothing them together, until cause and effect lose their neat alignment. Historians still debate how much psychological factors contributed to travellers becoming lost in winter conditions, beyond the obvious physical challenges. Some suggest that panic, even subtle, can distort perception and decision-making. Others argue that the environment itself is so disorienting that even calm, methodical individuals would struggle equally. Either way, the result is the same people walk, turn, adjust, and slowly drift away from where they intended to go. You stop again. The dark patch ahead resolves slightly. Trees, perhaps. Thin trunks faintly visible through the falling snow. You feel a small, cautious relief. Trees mean structure. Trees mean something fixed, something that does not shift with every passing gust. You head toward them, but as you approach, the ground beneath your feet changes subtly. The snow deepens. Your steps sink further, pulling at your legs with each movement. The effort increases just enough to notice. You lift your foot, plant it, lift again. The rhythm becomes heavier, slower, and then you realize something uncomfortable. You're no longer sure if the trees were ever in front of you. They seem slightly to the side now, or perhaps you've drifted, or perhaps they were never where you thought they were at all. You stop turning your head, trying to reconcile the image in your mind with the one before your eyes. The storm does not help. The last clear direction you had, the one marked by your own footsteps, is gone. Not hidden, not waiting, gone. And now every step you take is the first step in a path that may never lead back. The trees do not come closer the way you expect them to. You walk toward them with careful, deliberate steps, lifting your legs higher now as the snow deepens unevenly beneath you. Each foot sinks, presses and drags slightly before you can pull it free again. It is not exhausting yet, not truly, but it is beginning to ask questions of your body. Small questions, polite ones, the kind that will become very insistent later, and still the trees remain distant. They are there, you're fairly sure of it. Thin vertical strokes against a pale background, but their edges blur as the snowfall thickens, and the more you stare, the more uncertain their exact position becomes. It is like trying to focus on something through frosted glass. You know it exists, you just cannot quite prove where. You stop walking, not dramatically, just a quiet halt to your breath visible in soft clouds that vanish almost immediately into the cold air. You narrow your eyes slightly, tilting your head as if that might sharpen the view. The human brain is wonderfully stubborn. It believes that effort should be rewarded with clarity. It believes that if you just look harder, things will resolve themselves. But the snow has other plans. The horizon dissolves another degree almost imperceptibly. The sky lowers. The ground rises. The line between them softens until you're no longer certain where one ends and the other begins. The world is losing its edges, its corners, its helpful little contrasts. Everything becomes a gentle gradient of white and grey. This is the moment, though you might not name it yet. There is a specific phenomenon known as a whiteout where snow and cloud combine to eliminate shadows and depth perception entirely. Without contrast, your eyes cannot judge distance or shape correctly. Objects appear closer or farther than they are. The ground may seem flat when it slopes or uneven when it is smooth. Polar explorers, mountaineers, and even modern travellers have described the unsettling sensation of walking through a space that feels both endless and oddly enclosed at the same time. You take a step forward. The ground dips more sharply than expected. Your foot lands lower than your body predicted, and you lurch slightly, arms lifting again in that same quiet, unheroic gesture. There it is. The first small betrayal of perception. You recover quickly, of course, but the message has been delivered. You are not seeing the world as it is. You glance back more out of habit than hope. There is nothing to see. Where your path should be, there is only a smooth expanse of snow lightly textured by the wind. No footprints, no disturbance, no sign that you were ever there. It is not dramatic. It is not sudden, it is simply complete. You are alone in a place that does not remember you. There is a peculiar, almost unsettling historical note from Arctic expeditions. Some explorers reported that during severe whiteouts, they felt as though they were walking inside a blank room with no walls. No up, no down, no clear forward, just movement without reference. One account describes a man attempting to walk straight, only to discover later that he had been moving in a slow-looping curve, returning near his starting point without realizing it. The mind deprived of anchors invents its own. You turn slowly again, though the gesture feels less useful now. Every direction looks the same. The trees, if they are trees, have shifted position, or you have. It is impossible to say which feels more likely. A faint unease settles in your chest. Not panic, not yet, just a quiet awareness that the rules have changed. You choose a direction again. Not because it is correct, but because it exists. Forward becomes whatever lies ahead of your next step. It is a simple definition, and simplicity is comforting when everything else becomes abstract. Step. The snow creaks faintly beneath your weight, now a soft compression, followed by a subtle crunch where ice crystals press together. It is one of the few sounds left, and you find yourself listening to it more closely than you would have before. Sound becomes texture. Texture becomes reassurance. Step. Your breath is louder than it should be. Not because you are exerting yourself significantly, but because there is nothing else to compete with it. Inhale. Exhale. A steady rhythm, slightly faster than at rest. You notice the cold air entering your nose sharp and dry, and the faint warmth leaving your mouth in pale clouds. You try to orient yourself again using the wind. It brushes lightly against your face, inconsistent shifting, not a strong guide, more of a suggestion. You turn your head, trying to feel it more clearly on one side than the other. For a moment, you think you detect a direction left to right, perhaps, but then it changes, softens, disappears. Even the wind refuses to commit. There is a curious, almost humorous tidbit from certain northern traditions in extreme snow conditions. Some people would spit and watch the direction of the droplet's movement, or freeze to judge wind and orientation. It sounds slightly absurd, perhaps, but when your usual senses fail, you become surprisingly open to creative solutions. You consider it for a moment, then decide against it. There is dignity to maintain. A little. You continue walking. The effort increases subtly with each step. The snow is deeper here, or perhaps just less compact. Your legs lift higher, your pace slows. You begin to notice the small muscles working in ways they did not before. Ankles adjusting, knees rising, hips shifting to maintain balance on uncertain ground. Your body is adapting. Your mind, however, is still catching up. Historians still argue whether people in pre-modern winter environments relied more on environmental cues or internalized spatial awareness when navigating in low visibility. Some suggest that experienced travelers developed a kind of intuitive sense of direction built from years of movement through familiar terrain. Others believe that without visible landmarks, even the most practiced individuals were vulnerable to disorientation. It is a quiet debate, but one that echoes here in your slow, uncertain steps. You pause again. The trees, if they are trees, appear slightly clearer now, or perhaps you are closer. It is difficult to tell. Their shapes are still indistinct, but there is a verticality to them that the rest of the landscape lacks. You focus on that. Vertical lines, upright forms, something to aim toward. You adjust your path slightly. Step, step. The ground shifts again, a subtle incline this time. You lean forward, instinctively adjusting your balance. The snow here feels firmer, more compacted. Perhaps the wind has scoured this area, or perhaps the terrain beneath is different. You take another step, and then another. The trees grow marginally larger, not dramatically, not reassuringly, just enough to suggest progress. You hold on to that. Progress, however small, feels like a victory. But as you move, a strange sensation begins to creep in. It is not physical exactly. Not cold, not fatigue, not hunger. Something quieter, a slight detachment, as if the world has become less detailed, less immediate. The snow continues to fall. Your breath continues to rise and vanish. Your steps continue to press into the ground. And yet everything feels softened, muted. You blink, focusing again on the trees. They are still there. You think. The horizon, if it can still be called, that has disappeared entirely now. There is no line separating sky from earth, only a continuous field of pale, shifting light. You realize slowly that you're no longer walking through a landscape. You are walking through an absence of one. And somewhere in that absence, the idea of direction itself begins to feel optional. The cold does not arrive all at once. That would almost be too honest. Instead, it introduces itself with manners. A little sting at the fingertips, a little tightening across the cheeks, a faint ache in the ears, just enough to make you notice the shape of them. Then it slips closer, finding the places where cloth overlaps poorly and where human optimism has made careless assumptions. You walk on, still aiming for the vague darkness of trees, but the storm has become more intimate now. It no longer feels like weather happening around you. It feels like weather studying you. Snow gathers on your shoulders and collar. It melts where your body still gives off warmth, then seeps into the fabric, then cools again. That is the trick. Snow does not need to be dramatic to be dangerous. It only needs time pressure and a few small openings. A gap at the wrist, a loosened fastening at the throat. A boot that was never meant for this much depth. Very rude, really, but nature has never been famous for customer service. You pull your sleeves lower over your hands, trying to protect your fingers. The gesture helps for perhaps 3 breaths. Then the wind shifts and slides beneath the edge of your cuff anyway. Your skin tightens, your knuckles feel wooden, you flex your hands inside the sleeves, slow and clumsy, reminding each finger that it is still employed. In many cold regions, before modern synthetic fabrics, winter travellers depended on layers of wool, fur leather, linen, felt, and sometimes packed grass or straw for insulation. Wool remained useful because it could retain warmth, even when damp, which explains why so many historical communities prized it for harsh weather. Not glamorous perhaps, but deeply practical. A wool cloak may not make you look like a heroic oil painting after 3 hours in sleet, but it may keep you alive, which is a strong fashion statement. You look down at your boots. They're already collecting snow along the seams. Each step presses whiteness over the toes, then drags more of it upward around the ankles. The leather is stiffening. The laces, if you have laces, are dark with moisture. You imagine all the travellers who once stuffed extra rags around their feet, wrapped strips of cloth beneath sandals, lined shoes with hay, or simply kept moving because stopping meant letting the cold settle in like an unwanted guest with no plans to leave. Your feet are not frozen, not yet. But they have become distant, less responsive. The ground feels less detailed beneath them. Stones' roots, dips, and hardened ridges all arrive as muffled impressions. The snow does not only hide the path, it hides consequences until your foot is already committed. You step wrong. A shallow twist, nothing terrible, but your ankle complains. You stop and breathe through it. The pain is sharp for a moment, then fades into a dull warning. You test your weight carefully. Still usable. Good. You thank the ankle silently, as one does when negotiating with one's own poorly maintained equipment. The trees remain ahead, closer now, though still blurred. Their trunks stand like charcoal lines brushed through milk. The sight gives you something to focus on, but the cold keeps pulling attention back into your body. It narrows the world. First the horizon disappears, then the road, then the trees. Eventually the universe becomes one finger that will not warm one heel, rubbing raw, one breath that burns on the way in. A strange old piece of winter lore appears in your mind because apparently your mind has decided this is the moment for trivia. In parts of northern Europe, people sometimes used animal fat on exposed skin as a crude barrier against wind and cold. Others packed boots with dried moss for insulation. It sounds rustic and perhaps not entirely delightful, especially if your preferred skincare routine does not involve sheep grease. But in a storm like this, vanity becomes very negotiable. You rub your cheeks with your covered hands, the pressure stings. Your face feels both numb and tender, an unpleasant combination like a body part trying to be two bad ideas at once. The snow continues. It lands on your eyelashes. You blink and tiny cold beads melt at the edges of your eyes. Your nose runs slightly because history may be grand, tragic, sweeping and full of empires, but it also includes people wiping their noses on sleeves in bad weather. Museums tend to skip that display, which is probably merciful. You tuck your chin lower. Breathing becomes a small craft. In through the nose when you can manage it, out through the mouth when you must. Too much open-mouthed breathing dries the throat and chills the chest. Too much nose breathing feels sharp and narrow. You compromise as humans have always done with winter, by doing whatever seems least unpleasant in the moment. There is an ongoing scholarly dispute over how much ordinary winter clothing varied between social classes in harsh climates. Wealthier travellers might have better furs-lined gloves, riding cloaks, or access to warm inns along major roads, while poorer walkers often relied on patched garments, shared cloaks, or whatever the household could spare. But some researchers point out that local knowledge and practical layering could sometimes matter more than wealth alone. A rich fool in bad boots is still a rich fool in bad boots, and the snow is not easily impressed. You reach the first trees. At least you think they are the first. One trunk rises beside you, dark bark ridged beneath its powdering of snow. You place a hand against it. The bark is cold, rough, reassuringly real. After the blankness of the open ground, the texture feels almost luxurious. Here is a thing with shape. Here is a thing that does not drift away when the wind changes. You lean near it for a moment, not resting exactly, just borrowing its certainty. The tree smells faintly of resin and wet bark. Beneath the sharper scent of ash and snow, there is something earthy here, something living and stubborn. You inhale slowly. The smell steadies you. But among the trees, new problems gather. The wind is less direct, which helps. The snow does not strike your face quite as steadily, yet the ground becomes more treacherous. Roots twist under the snow. Fallen branches hide beneath smooth drifts. Low shrubs catch at your legs. Every few steps your boot breaks through a crust into softer snow below, and your balance falters. Your clothing brushes against branches, shaking loose small spills of snow that slide down your neck with an intimacy you did not request. You gasp softly. Cold water touches the skin between collar and shoulder. It travels downward in a thin line, shockingly personal. You hunch, twisting awkwardly, trying to trap warmth inside your coat and push the melt away from your skin. For a moment, all the great themes of history vanish. Empires, trade routes, migrations, belief systems, all gone. There's only snow down the back of your neck. Civilization has limits. You continue between the trunks. The storm sounds different here. Less like open air, more like a whisper passing through needles and branches. Snow taps softly on bark. Occasionally a branch bends under weight and releases, sending powder down in a muted rush. The trees creak faintly, not loudly, but enough to remind you that even shelter has its own voice. Your hands are colder now. You flex them again, but the motion is slower. The fingertips feel thick and clumsy, as though you were wearing gloves inside your skin. You press them under your arms for warmth and keep walking with elbows tucked close. It changes your balance, but it helps. A practical fact from winter travel becomes suddenly obvious. Movement creates warmth, but movement also creates sweat, and sweat can become dangerous when it cools. Many experienced cold weather travellers learn to regulate pace, carefully avoiding both idleness and overheating. You understand the wisdom immediately. Walk too slowly and the cold settles deeper. Walk too hard and damp clothing becomes another enemy. How considerate of winter to punish both laziness and effort. The ash is less visible under the trees, caught in branches or buried by snow, but you still smell it. Faint, bitter, persistent. It lingers like a warning from Section 1, that strange, warm powder pretending to be snow. You remember how it settled on your shoulders, how the silence felt unnatural before the storm fully claimed the land. Now the silence has changed. It is no longer empty. It is padded, layered, filled with the soft labour of snow covering everything. You look ahead through the trunks. No road, no light, no sign. Only more trees, more whiteness, more uncertain depth. The cold presses again at your wrists, your throat, your feet. It has found you properly now. Not as a sudden attacker, but as a patient companion walking at your side, matching your pace, waiting for the moment when you stop paying attention. And you realise that to survive this, you must treat every seam, every breath, every step, and every small patch of exposed skin as part of the map. Because direction is no longer only out there. It is also in the body, in what hurts, what numbs, what warms, and what quietly begins to fail. You slow your steps not because you want to, but because something inside you has started listening more carefully. The trees shift the storm's voice. Out in the open, the snow had fallen like a soft curtain. Here it moves in layers, catching on branches, sliding down bark, whispering against needles. The sound is not loud, but it is no longer empty. It gives you something to follow, something to measure yourself against. And that matters more than you expected. You pause, tilting your head slightly. There, a faint crack somewhere to your right. Not sharp, not alarming, just the sound of a branch adjusting under weight. You wait, holding your breath for a moment, as if the forest might continue speaking if you remain polite enough. It does not. But even that single sound steadies you. You begin to understand something simple and very old when sight becomes unreliable hearing steps forward. It does not replace vision, but it becomes influential. You listen not only for what is there, but for what is missing. No voices, no animals moving through brush, no distant tools, no chopping, no wheels, no bells. In many parts of the world, especially across Europe and Asia before modern navigation, travellers depended on sound far more than we often imagine. Church bells, for instance, were not only religious markers, but practical guides. Their tones carried across fields and forests, especially in winter, when cold air helped sound travel farther. A bell could mean direction, safety, community. Lose the bell, and you lose a thread back to people. You turn slowly, hoping just slightly that you might hear something like that now. Nothing answers, only your breath. It is louder than before. You notice it more. Each inhale is sharper, each exhale a visible cloud that disappears quickly. You try to quiet it instinctively, as if making less noise might help you hear better. But breathing is not optional, despite your best attempts to negotiate with it. You take a few more steps. Snow compresses beneath your boots with a soft, steady rhythm. The forest floor is uneven, but the trees provide a kind of orientation. Vertical lines repeating. You drift between them, adjusting your path in small increments, aiming for spaces that look slightly clearer. A faint smell reaches you. You stop again. It is subtle. So subtle you almost dismiss it. But it lingers just long enough to feel real. Smoke, perhaps, or anything like it. Not the bitter, distant ash from before. This is softer, warmer, familiar in a different way. You breathe in again more deliberately. Yes, there is something there. You turn your head slowly, trying to trace it. Smell is a difficult guide. It does not form straight lines. It drifts, curls, fades, returns. But it suggests presence, and presence right now is precious. There is a curious historical note that some rural travellers relied heavily on smell during winter journeys. Wood smoke livestock, cooking fires, even tanneries or bakeries each had its own signature. A faint scent could indicate a nearby settlement long before it became visible. Of course, this required familiarity and a bit of luck. Smell travels unevenly and the wind is not always cooperative. Still, it was one more thread to hold on to. You take a cautious step in the direction where the scent felt strongest. Then another. It fades. You stop. That is the problem. It does not remain consistent. The wind shifts, and the scent disappears as if it had never been there. You turn slightly, searching for it again. A moment passes. Then faintly it returns, but from a slightly different angle. You adjust again. It feels almost like chasing something that does not want to be found. You exhale slowly, trying not to let frustration take hold. This is not a puzzle with clean edges. This is a suggestion, a possibility. You cannot demand certainty from it, so you move slowly, following not a line but a pattern. When the scent strengthens, you lean toward it. When it fades, you pause and wait, letting the air settle again. It is not efficient, but it is something. Your ears remain alert. Another small sound, this time to your left. A soft crunch like snow shifting under weight. You freeze. The forest holds still with you. You listen harder, as if effort alone might pull the sound back into existence. Your heartbeat feels louder now, an unhelpful drum in your chest. You try to separate it from everything else. There! A faint movement again, not close, not far, just present. Animal, perhaps. You do not see it. The trees and snow hide too much, but the sound is distinct enough to register. A step, a pause, another step. You remain still. There is an old and slightly unsettling tidbit that in some regions people believed animals behaved differently before and during severe storms, either vanishing entirely or moving in unusual patterns. Some took this as a sign or warning. Others simply noted that animals being sensible often sought shelter long before humans realized they should do the same. You wonder briefly if whatever made that sound is leaving the storm behind, or heading somewhere you should follow. The thought lingers. You shift your weight carefully, trying not to make unnecessary noise. The snow beneath your boots creaks softly despite your effort. The sound in the distance pauses, then resumes slightly farther away now. You hesitate. Following an unseen animal through a snowstorm is not a plan. It is a decision made in the absence of better ones. And yet, there is a logic to it. Animals know their environment in ways you do not. They know shelter routes, safe ground. But they also know how to survive without you. You take a step in that direction anyway. Then another. The sound fades again. You stop listening, waiting for it to return. It does not. The forest settles back into its layered quiet, the soft fall of snow filling the gaps where movement had been. You exhale slowly. So much for that. There is a continuing academic discussion about how much people in the past relied on animals as guides during travel. Some accounts suggest deliberate following, especially of domesticated animals like dogs or horses. Others argue that such stories are often exaggerated or romanticized. Animals may know their way, but they do not always lead others kindly. Still, the idea persists perhaps because it offers a comforting image in an uncomfortable situation. You turn your attention back to the faint scent. It returns again briefly. You move toward it. Step. Pause. Step. The trees thin slightly here, opening into a wider space. The snow is deeper again, less interrupted by roots and branches. Your legs work harder, lifting, pushing, sinking. Your breathing adjusts to match. The scent grows a little stronger. Not much, just enough to notice. You feel a small, cautious hope. Not the loud kind, not the kind that makes promises. Just a quiet suggestion that something exists beyond the storm. Something human, perhaps. Something warm. You keep moving, listening, breathing, following the faintest thread of sound and smell, because right now those are the only maps you have left. And in a world where the horizon has vanished, even the smallest map feels like a lifeline. The scent fades again, as if it has reconsidered its generosity. You stand there for a moment, letting the absence settle in. It is strange how quickly you grow attached to even the faintest sign of direction. A whisper of smoke becomes a promise. A single sound becomes a guide. And when they vanish, the quiet feels heavier than before, as though something has been taken from you rather than simply not given. Your stomach tightens. At first you think it is just the cold. Cold has a way of pulling everything inward, drawing your awareness toward the center of your body. But this is different. A hollow feeling. A gentle, persistent reminder that you have not eaten in some time. You try to ignore it. Naturally. Humans are very good at ignoring things that are inconvenient, especially when those things are internal. Hunger, however, is patient. It does not demand attention all at once. It taps lightly, then waits, then taps again. You swallow your throat dry from the cold air and keep walking. The snow resists you more now. Each step feels slightly heavier than the last, as though the ground itself has decided to participate in your exhaustion. Your legs lift, push forward, sink and rise again. A rhythm forms slow and deliberate, like a metronome set just a little too low. Step. Pause. Step. Your breath follows. Inhale. Exhale. The world narrows further. The trees around you blur into a repeating pattern of dark and pale. You no longer examine each one. You simply move between them, guided by instinct more than intention. The scent you'd been following returns only in fragments, now teasing at the edge of perception, before slipping away again. Your stomach tightens once more. This time it lingers. There is a well-documented reality in historical travel accounts. Hunger can alter decision-making long before it becomes physically debilitating. Explorers, soldiers, and ordinary travelers alike have recorded how the absence of food begins to shift priorities, focus, and even perception. A person may begin to think less about long-term safety and more about immediate relief even when that relief is uncertain. You feel the beginning of that shift. It is subtle. You find yourself thinking about food not in practical terms but in memory. Warm bread, thick stew, something simple, something filling. The kind of meal that would feel entirely ordinary in another context now takes on a kind of quiet importance. You shake your head slightly as if to clear it. Not helpful. You need direction, not recipes. Still the mind wanders. There is an odd historical tidbit that in some harsh winter conditions travellers would carry small dense foods specifically designed to be eaten quickly without preparation. Hard cheese, dried meat, compact bread. Items that would not freeze solid or spoil easily, not luxurious but reliable. The kind of food that exists purely to keep a person moving. You do not have any of those things. You have only the memory of them. You continue walking. The snow deepens again, rising nearly to your calves in places. Your pace slows further. Each step requires more effort, more intention. Your legs begin to feel heavier not just from the resistance of the snow, but from something internal. A quiet fatigue that spreads gradually like ink in water. You pause, placing your hands on your thighs for a moment. Your breath comes slightly faster now. Not alarming, just noticeable. You straighten again, pulling your arms close to your body to conserve warmth and look ahead. The forest opens slightly once more. A wider space. The snow here is smoother, less broken by roots or debris. It stretches outward in a pale, uninterrupted field. The trees stand at the edges like quiet observers, leaving you exposed in the centre. You hesitate. Open ground offers visibility, but it also removes the small comforts of structure. No trunks to guide your path, no branches to break the wind, just you and the snow. You step forward anyway. The cold feels sharper here. The wind, though still gentle, reaches you more directly. It slides across your face, your neck, your hands. You pull your sleeves lower again, flexing your fingers inside them, trying to keep sensation alive. Your stomach tightens once more. This time it feels less like a reminder and more like a presence. You exhale slowly. Hunger, cold uncertainty. They begin to form a quiet partnership, each one reinforcing the others. The body becomes less efficient. The mind becomes less precise. Small decisions take longer. Simple judgments feel heavier. There is ongoing academic discussion about how much internal states like hunger and fatigue influence navigation errors in historical winter travel. Some researchers suggest that physical depletion directly impaired spatial reasoning. Others argue that the primary issue was not cognitive decline, but the cumulative effect of stresses reducing overall resilience. Either way, the conclusion is similar. The body and mind are not separate systems in these conditions. They rise and fall together. You take another step. The snow shifts beneath you. For a moment you think you feel something different underfoot, firmer, more compact. You pause, pressing your weight down carefully. Yes, the ground here feels slightly more stable. You take another step, and another. A faint line begins to emerge. Not a clear path, not a road, but a subtle difference in texture. The snow is thinner here, more compressed, as if something or someone has passed this way before. You follow it, cautiously. Your steps align with the firmer ground, your pace adjusting slightly. It is easier to walk here just a little, less resistance, less sinking. Your breath steadies. This could be something. A trail, a route, or simply a coincidence. You continue along it anyway. The line curves gently, almost imperceptibly. You follow the curve without questioning it, grateful for any guidance, however faint. The trees remain at distance, now framing the open space without intruding. Your stomach quiet, slightly distracted by the small relief of easier movement. You walk. Step, step, step. The line continues. And for the first time in a while, you are not choosing a direction. You are following one. It is a fragile comfort. A dangerous one, perhaps. But in a world where every other guide has vanished, even the faintest suggestion of a path feels like something worth trusting. At least for now. The faint line beneath your feet continues, and for a while that is enough. You follow it with quiet concentration, placing each step carefully where the snow feels firmer, more compact. It's not a road, not even a proper trail, but it offers a rhythm your body recognizes. A slight reduction in effort. A suggestion that someone at some point moved this way and pressed the ground into something more reliable. It feels almost like companionship. Not the kind that speaks or reassures, but the kind that leaves evidence. A trace of decision. A memory of direction. You do not know who passed here or when or why. It could have been hours ago, days ago, or even longer. The storm has softened everything. But the path remains faint and fragile, like a whisper that has not quite faded. You keep moving! Your breath settles into a steady pattern again. The effort is still there, but slightly reduced. Your legs lift more easily, your steps sink less deeply. It is a small mercy, but in this landscape, small mercies feel enormous. The scent you followed earlier is gone now, completely. You pause once briefly to test the air again, turning your head slowly, breathing in through your nose. Nothing. Just cold. Just snow. Whatever hint of smoke you thought you detected has dissolved into the storm, leaving no trace behind. You exhale and continue. The path curves again, gently guiding you without explanation. You follow without questioning, because questioning would require alternatives, and alternatives are in short supply. Ahead, the snow thickens in shallow drifts, rising in soft, uneven mounds. The path cuts through them not cleanly, but with enough consistency to remain visible under your feet. You step over one drift, then another, your balance shifting slightly with each movement. And then you see it, or rather you think you do. A shape, low to the ground, partially buried just ahead and slightly to your right. You stop narrowing your eyes, trying to resolve it through the falling snow. It does not move, it does not change. It simply sits there, half covered as if the storm has been slowly erasing it. You step closer. Carefully, the shape becomes clearer. Wooden, perhaps. Angular. A structure of some kind, though small. Not a building. Not quite. More like a fragment of one. You approach it slowly, your boots pressing into the firmer path beneath the snow. The object reveals itself piece by piece, a broken section of fencing. Rough wood, weathered and split its edges, softened by snow. You reach out and touch it. The wood is cold but solid, real. You feel a quiet shift inside you. This is something made by hands, placed with intention, a boundary once, a marker of space. Perhaps it bordered a field or enclosed livestock, or simply marked the edge of a property that no longer exists. In many rural parts of the past, fences like this were common, simple constructions built from whatever materials were available. They were not always maintained, not always replaced. Over time, they broke, collapsed, and were gradually reclaimed by the landscape. Snow in particular has a way of softening these remnants, turning them into vague suggestions of their former purpose. You stand there for a moment, your hand resting on the wood. It feels grounding, a reminder that this place, however empty it seems now, was once part of a human world. A place of boundaries, of ownership, of routine. Someone stood here once, perhaps on a day not unlike this, though hopefully less dramatic, and decided that this line mattered. You follow the fence fragment with your eyes. It extends only a short distance before disappearing beneath the snow. A few more posts barely visible, leaning at uncertain angles. The path you've been following passes near it, then continues on, curving gently away. You hesitate. The fence suggests a location, a property, perhaps even a nearby structure, but it is incomplete, broken. It does not offer clear direction, only a hint of what once was. You look back at the path. It remains the only consistent guide you have. There is a curious detail from historical accounts of abandoned settlements. Travellers sometimes mistook partial remains for signs of habitation, only to discover that the place had been empty for years, even decades. Snow and time have a way of preserving shapes while removing meaning. A wall without a roof, a fence without a field, a path that leads nowhere. You feel that possibility here, and yet the presence of the fence changes something. It confirms that you're not entirely alone in a meaningless landscape. There was structure here, there were decisions, there was life at some point. You withdraw your hand and continue along the path. The snow falls steadily, soft but persistent. It gathers on the fence posts, smoothing their rough edges, slowly integrating them back into the ground. In time they will vanish completely, just as your footprints did. You walk on. The path narrows slightly, or perhaps the snow encroaches from either side. Your steps remain aligned with the firmer ground, but the margins feel less certain now. You adjust your pace, focusing more closely on where you place your feet. Your body feels heavier, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to notice. Your legs lift with a bit more effort. Your arms remain tucked close, conserving warmth. Your fingers, though still moving, feel less responsive, their motion slower, less precise. You flex them again. They obey, but reluctantly. There is a quiet awareness settling in now, something that does not demand attention but refuses to be ignored. A sense that the conditions around you are not static. They're evolving gradually, steadily in ways that may not favour you. You keep moving. The path continues, and then slowly it begins to fade. At first it is subtle. The snow grows slightly deeper. The firmness beneath your feet becomes less consistent. You take a step and feel the familiar resistance of compacted ground. The next step sinks more than expected. Then the next returns to firmness. You slow down. The pattern breaks. You stop looking down, trying to identify the line you've been following so carefully. It is still there perhaps, but less distinct. The snow has begun to reclaim it, filling in the compressed areas, smoothing the differences. You take a tentative step forward. The ground feels uncertain. Another step. Softer. You shift slightly to the side, searching for the firmer texture again. Nothing. You turn in a small circle, scanning the ground, trying to rediscover the path, but the snow has blurred it beyond recognition. The line that guided you, however faintly, has dissolved into the same uniform surface as everything else. You stand there still, your breath rising and vanishing in the cold air. The path is gone. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just gone. And once again you are left with a world that offers no clear direction, no visible boundary, no reliable guide. Only the quiet, persistent fall of snow and the growing realization that every imagined shelter, every hoped-for refuge remains just out of reach. Night does not fall so much as gather. It begins in the spaces between trees where the snow already looks slightly darker, slightly deeper, as if the ground has been holding shadows in reserve. Then it settles into the air itself. The pale brightness of the storm weakens by degrees, and the world, which had been white and grey, becomes blue, then violet, then a colour too dim to name. You keep standing where the path disappeared. For a moment you do not move. Not because you have decided wisely to conserve energy, though that would sound very sensible in a documentary. You simply do not know which direction deserves the honour of your next mistake. The snow continues falling with maddening calm. It lands on your shoulders, your sleeves, the broken fence behind you, the vanished path beneath you. It does not hurry. It does not apologize. It simply continues its quiet work of making every choice look equally reasonable and equally foolish. You take one slow breath, then another. The air tastes colder now, cleaner in one way, harsher in another. The bitter ash still lingers faintly, but night dilutes it. The smell of trees grows stronger, damp bark and buried needles, a dark green scent under the snow. Somewhere above you, branches shift with a soft creak. The sound travels oddly in the dimness, closer than it should be. You turn toward it. Nothing moves. At least nothing you can see. Night changes the storm. In daylight, even poor daylight, you had the illusion of distance. You could imagine that beyond the whiteness there was a horizon, a road, a field, perhaps a roof line, waiting kindly for you to notice it. Now the world draws inward. Your visible surroundings shrink to the nearest trunks, the nearest drifts, the nearest breath leaving your mouth. Beyond that, everything becomes suggestion. In earlier centuries, winter travel after dark was often avoided when possible, especially away from known roads or settlements. Not because people were timid, but because darkness removed landmarks, made uneven ground more dangerous, and increased the risk of missing shelter entirely. Even experienced travellers could be forced to stop huddle or wait for dawn rather than continue blindly. You understand that logic very well now. Unfortunately, understanding a sensible option does not magically provide a safe place to perform it. You look for shelter, not a house. You're no longer that ambitious. A fold in the ground, a cluster of low branches, a fallen tree. Anything that might block wind, reduce falling snow, and make you feel slightly less like a misplaced offering to winter. The broken fence gives you nothing. The trees nearby are too thin. Their branches start too high, and the trunks stand apart like polite strangers at a very awkward gathering. You move forward slowly, choosing a direction almost at random, scanning the dim forest for shapes that might mean protection. Step. Snow rises around your boot. Step. A branch brushes your shoulder and sheds powder down your sleeve. You flinch, then sigh softly at yourself. Very impressive. Defeated again by a tree with timing. The darkness deepens. Your eyes adjust, but only partly. Snow reflects what little light remains, so the ground is visible in a faint, ghostly way. The trunks are darker lines. The skies a pale blur above them. Everything else is uncertain. This is the hour when old stories become easier to understand. Not believe perhaps, not fully. You're a modern listener, surely far too reasonable to worry about spirits in a snow-filled forest. And yet when every tree appears, disappears, and reappears through blowing flakes when sounds arrive, without visible causes, when your own breath looks like something leaving you, it becomes less surprising that winter gathered myths around itself. Across many northern cultures, people told stories of beings who moved through snow, lured travellers, punished arrogance, or guarded dangerous places. Some were spirits of frost or storm, some were wandering dead, some were tricksters, some were simply the shape fear takes when nobody has a lantern and the nearest inn is very much not near. A folkloric oddity from parts of Scandinavia and the Alps describes travellers hearing voices in snowstorms, sometimes interpreted as spirits, hidden people, or omens. More practical explanations include wind through terrain, distant human sounds distorted by weather, or the mind making patterns from isolation. Still, if you hear your name whispered in a dark forest, you're allowed to be briefly dramatic about it. You hear something, "Not your name!" Just a low sound, faint and stretched thin by the storm. You stop. The sound comes again, or you imagine it does. A murmur, perhaps. A creak. Perhaps a distant animal. Perhaps a branch shifting. Perhaps your own coat rubbing against itself. You hold still listening. The forest offers nothing more. You continue, but your pace has changed. You're more cautious now. Night has made every step feel consequential. A hidden root could twist your ankle. A hollow could swallow your leg to the knee. A slope could lead you farther from whatever faint chance of shelter remains. Your body knows this. Your feet probe before committing weight. Your knees stay slightly bent. Your arms, still tucked close for warmth, occasionally lift to balance when the snow gives way beneath you. The cold has sharpened again. Your cheeks burn. Your fingertips ache, then dull, then ache again when you flex them. Your feet feel distant, wrapped in a heavy numb pressure. You stamp once, gently trying to wake sensation in your toes. The sound is swallowed almost immediately. Researchers continue to disagree over how much nocturnal fear shaped winter travel narratives compared with practical danger. Some argue that supernatural motifs were mostly storytelling devices, added later, making ordinary disorientation more memorable. Others suggest that belief itself affected behaviour, causing travellers to avoid certain routes, hurry through woods, or misread natural sounds. Either way, fear becomes part of the landscape once the light goes. You move toward a darker cluster ahead. It might be a fallen tree or a thicket or only shadow gathered among trunks. As you approach, the shape resolves slowly. Low branches, dense evergreen. Snow piled thick on outer limbs forming a drooping wall. Not a hut, not a barn, not even a respectable shed, but perhaps enough. You crouch slightly and peer beneath the branches. Inside, the snow is shallower. The ground looks darker, less exposed. Needles hang close together, catching the falling flakes before they reach the earth. It smells stronger here, resinous and damp, almost warm by comparison, though that is clearly an exaggeration your body is using for morale. You push carefully under the outer branches. Snow slides from above, brushing your back and shoulders. You wince as cold powder finds the side of your neck, but you keep moving until you are partly beneath the tree's cover. The space is cramped. You cannot stand upright. You bend, then crouch one hand against the trunk for balance. For the first time in what feels like a long while, the snow is not falling directly on your face. The relief is immediate and almost embarrassing. You settle lower, not fully sitting yet, because sitting in deep cold is an agreement you should not sign casually. You lean against the trunk, feeling rough bark through layers of damp cloth. The branches around you creak softly under the weight of snow. Outside, the storm passes in pale sheets through the darkness. You listen. No bells, no voices, no road, only the slow breath of night moving through the trees. And somehow, in this cramped shelter of needles and shadow with cold pressing at every seam and no direction waiting beyond the branches, the old winter stories feel less like superstition and more like company. Not comforting company exactly, but company all the same. You remain crouched beneath the branches, listening as the storm continues its quiet work beyond your small pocket of shelter. For a while you do nothing. That too is a decision. Your breathing slows slightly, no longer competing with the constant fall of snow against your face. Here the sound is softened, filtered through layers of needles and wood. It becomes a distant hush, like something happening far away, even though you know it surrounds you entirely. You adjust your position, shifting your weight against the tree trunk. The bark presses through your damp clothing, firm and unyielding. It is not comfortable, but it is solid, and solidity has become a rare luxury. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to rest them. The darkness behind your eyelids feels no different from the darkness outside, which is mildly unsettling. You open them again quickly, as if you might lose something by keeping them closed too long. The cold has settled deeper now. It is no longer just at the surface of your skin. It has begun to seep inward, slow and deliberate. Your hands tucked under your arms feel heavy. Your fingers respond when you flex them, but the motion is delayed like a message travelling through poor signal. You rub them together gently. The friction helps a little, not much, enough to remind you they are still yours. Your feet are worse. They sit in your boots like distant objects. You cannot feel the exact shape of your toes anymore, only a dull pressure, a kind of presence without detail. You shift your weight, pressing down, lifting slightly, trying to reintroduce sensation. It works briefly. A faint prickling returns sharp and unpleasant, but welcome. You repeat the movement, small and careful, not wanting to lose what little awareness you have regained. There is a practical truth known to winter travellers across many cultures. Stopping completely in cold conditions can be more dangerous than continuing to move even when movement is difficult. The body generates heat through motion, and without it warmth fades quickly. Shelter helps, but only if it can significantly reduce exposure. A shallow refuge like this one offers some protection, but not enough to allow you to simply wait indefinitely. You know this, which is inconvenient because the idea of leaving this small pocket of relative calm feels deeply unappealing. You glance out from beneath the branches. The storm has not lessened. If anything, it feels thicker now, the flakes denser, the air more crowded. The world beyond your shelter is a shifting veil of white and grey, with only the nearest tree trunks visible as darker interruptions. You sigh softly. Staying here is not a solution. Moving again is not a guarantee. You consider your options, which is to say you consider the absence of good ones. There is a curious historical note that in some regions, travellers caught in sudden snowstorms would dig shallow pits or hollows in the snow itself, using it as insulation against wind. Snow, despite its cold nature, can trap air and reduce heat loss when arranged properly. It sounds counterintuitive, but in the absence of built shelter, it could mean the difference between enduring the night and not. You glance at the ground around you. The snow is deep enough in places, but the effort required to dig with your current level of energy and numbness would be significant. Your hands, already struggling with basic movement, would not cooperate easily with such a task. You file the idea away. Possible, but not ideal. You shift again, preparing to stand. Your legs protest slightly as you straighten, stiffness setting in from the brief pause. You move slowly, carefully, using the tree for support as you rise. The branches above you brush against your shoulders, shedding small amounts of snow that slide down your back. You resist the urge to react too strongly. You step out from beneath the shelter. The cold greets you immediately, sharper than before, as if mildly offended that you attempted to avoid it. The snow resumes its direct contact with your face, your clothing, your hands. You take a breath, then another, and you begin to walk again. The forest at night feels different. Not just darker, but more enclosed. The spaces between trees seem narrower. The distance is harder to judge. You move more slowly now, each step deliberate, your foot testing the ground before committing fully. The snow muffles your movement, but you still listen carefully. For anything. A sound. A change. A clue. Nothing answers. You continue. This terrain shifts slightly, the ground rising and falling in gentle waves beneath the snow. You adjust your balance with each step, your body working harder to maintain stability. Your mind begins to wander. Not dramatically, not in a way that feels out of control, but in small, drifting thoughts. Fragments of memory, images of warmth. The idea of a fire not as a practical tool, but as a feeling. Light flickering against walls. The sound of wood cracking as it burns. You shake your head again, more firmly this time. Focus. There is a subtle but important observation recorded in various accounts of cold exposure as the body begins to lose heat. Cognitive function can become impaired. Not suddenly, not in an obvious way, but gradually. Attention drifts. Decisions become slower. Thoughts lose their sharp edges. You recognize the early signs, which is both helpful and slightly concerning. You force yourself to pay attention to your steps, to the ground, to the immediate environment. You count your breaths for a few moments just to anchor yourself. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It helps. A little. The trees thin again. You emerge into another open space, though calling it open feels misleading. It is simply less crowded by trunks. The snow here is deeper, untouched by the slight shelter the forest provided. You step forward. Your foot sinks nearly to your knee. You pull it free with effort, the motion slow and heavy. The next step is the same, and the next. Each movement requires more energy, more intention. Your pace slows significantly. You pause, breathing harder now. This is not sustainable. You look around, scanning the dim landscape for alternatives. The forest edge lies behind you, the trees forming a darker boundary. Ahead, the open ground stretches into the indistinct distance. There is no clear path, no visible road, only choices that feel equally uncertain. There is ongoing discussion among historians and environmental researchers about how landscapes themselves influence survival during winter travel. Forests could provide shelter, but also hide hazards. Open ground allowed for easier navigation in clear conditions, but became treacherous in deep snow. The balance between these environments often determined outcomes in ways that individuals could not fully control. You consider returning to the trees, then you consider continuing forward. Neither option feels correct. You stand there, the snow rising around your legs, the cold pressing steadily against your body, the darkness settling fully into the world, and you realize something quietly unsettling. The idea of a road, of a clear path beneath the snow may no longer apply. Whatever route once existed here has been erased not just physically, but conceptually. You are not off the road. The road itself has disappeared. And now every step you take is not a deviation, but the only path that exists. You stand at the edge of the open ground, aware now that the forest behind you is not just a place you pass through, but a kind of fragile protection you may have abandoned too quickly. The snow in front of you rises in soft, deceptive layers, smooth as untouched fabric. It looks gentle. It always does. But your last few steps have already proven otherwise. Beneath that surface lies depth, resistance, and the quiet potential to drain what little strength you have left. You glance back. The trees are darker now, more distant than they should be, as though the storm has gently nudged them away while you weren't paying attention. Their outlines blur in the falling snow, but they remain visible enough to remind you that shelter exists behind you, even if it was imperfect. Ahead, however, something else draws your attention. A faint line. Not in the snow itself, but in the way the land seems to dip slightly, forming a shallow curve across the open ground. It is subtle, almost nothing. But your eyes catch it, and your mind, eager for structure, latches onto it immediately. You step toward it. The snow resists as expected, but you push through, lifting your legs higher, forcing each step. Your breath grows heavier again, the rhythm less steady, more urgent. Step, pull, step. The shallow curve becomes clearer as you approach. It is not a path in the traditional sense, but the snow lies differently here. Slightly smoother, slightly less deep, as if something beneath has shaped it. You reach the edge of the dip and pause. You press your foot down carefully. The surface holds. Not firm, not solid, but more stable than the surrounding drifts. You take another step, then another. The snow compresses beneath you with a different sound, a softer, denser crunch. You look down, trying to understand what you're standing on. A thought forms. Water, or rather what used to be water. A frozen stream, perhaps. Or a narrow river now hidden beneath layers of snow and ice. You hesitate. This is not necessarily good news. Throughout history, frozen waterways have offered both opportunity and danger. In winter, they could become natural roads, smoother and easier to traverse than snow-covered land. Traders, travellers, and entire caravans have used frozen rivers as routes cutting across terrain that would otherwise be difficult or impossible. But ice is not always trustworthy, and snow has a habit of disguising its weaknesses. You shift your weight slightly, testing the surface beneath you. It holds, though you feel a faint, unsettling give. Not enough to alarm you immediately, but enough to remind you that what lies beneath is not solid ground in the usual sense. You take another cautious step. The surface creaks. Softly, you freeze. The sound is subtle, almost lost beneath the falling snow, but you feel it as much as hear it. A faint vibration through your boot, a whisper of movement beneath the surface. You hold your breath. Nothing else happens. Slowly you exhale. There's a peculiar historical note from regions with harsh winters. Experienced travellers often listened for specific sounds when crossing frozen water. A deep, solid ice would produce a certain kind of muted, stable response underfoot, while thinner ice might crack sharply or emit higher-pitched noises. It was not an exact science, but it was one of the few tools available. You listen now, carefully. The next step produces another soft creak, but nothing sharp, nothing sudden. The ice, if it is ice, seems to hold. You continue. Each step is deliberate, placed with care. You avoid sudden movements, keeping your weight balanced, your pace slow. The snow on top of the ice smooths the surface, making it easier to walk than the deep drifts you left behind. For the first time in a while, movement feels manageable. Your breath steadies slightly. Your legs, though tired, find a more consistent rhythm. Step, step, step. The frozen path stretches ahead, curving gently through the landscape. It offers direction, even if that direction is uncertain, and in this moment that is enough. You follow it. The trees recede further, becoming faint shapes at the edges of your vision. The open space around you feels larger now, more exposed, but also less chaotic. The snow here is more uniform, less broken by hidden obstacles. The wind moves more freely. It brushes across the surface, lifting fine particles of snow into low drifting waves. They slide across the ice, catching the dim light in a way that almost looks like movement beneath the surface. You keep your gaze forward. Looking too closely at the shifting patterns makes it harder to judge depth, harder to trust your footing. Your body, however, remains alert. Every small sound, every subtle shift in pressure beneath your feet registers immediately. Your senses have narrowed, focusing almost entirely on balance, temperature, and movement. There is a quiet tension in that focus, a constant awareness that one wrong step could change everything. You remember something. Not a clear memory, more like a fragment of knowledge. Stories of people crossing frozen rivers, trusting the surface, only to find themselves suddenly in water so cold it steals breath instant. You push the thought aside. Helpful but not helpful right now. There is an ongoing debate among historians about how often such accidents occurred, compared to how often they were recorded. Dramatic failures tend to be remembered and written down, while successful crossings leave little trace. This can make the risk seem either exaggerated or understated depending on which accounts you consider. You decide quietly that statistics are not particularly comforting at the moment. You take another step. The ice holds. Another still holds. Your confidence grows just slightly. Not enough to relax completely, but enough to keep moving without constant hesitation. The curve of the frozen path leads you onward, guiding you through the storm in a way the open ground could not. It feels almost like a road, a hidden one waiting beneath the snow. You follow it, because there is nothing else to follow, and because for now it feels like the least dangerous of your options, even if every step carries the quiet, persistent question of what lies just beneath the surface. You continue along the frozen path, each step placed with care, each shift of weight negotiated like a quiet agreement between you and whatever lies beneath. The surface still holds. That fact becomes a kind of fragile trust. Not certainty, not safety, just a working relationship. You step, it supports. You step again, it does not object. Over time, your body begins to accept this rhythm, easing the tightness in your shoulders, just slightly, allowing your breath to settle into something less guarded. The storm continues, but here out on this pale ribbon of ice, it feels different. More open. The wind glides across the surface without interruption, carrying loose snow in thin sheets that skim past your boots. The sound is soft, almost like distant water, though you know that is not what it is. The sky above remains a dim, endless blur, offering no direction, no guidance, only a steady presence. Steady. You keep your eyes down more often now, watching, listening, feeling, and then something interrupts that pattern, a shape low and moving just at the edge of your vision. You stop. Your breath pauses mid-cycle. There it is again, a flicker of motion against the pale ground, darker than the snow, lighter than the trees. It moves with purpose, though not quickly. A steady, deliberate pace. You turn your head slightly, trying not to startle whatever it is. The shape resolves slowly. A dog, perhaps. Or something like one. Lean low to the ground, its coat dusted with snow. It moves across the frozen surface ahead of you, crossing your path at an angle, head lowered, as if following a scent you cannot detect. You remain still. The animal does not look at you. It does not acknowledge your presence at all. It simply continues, its paws pressing lightly against the snow-covered ice, its body moving with an ease you envy immediately. You watch it. There is something unsettling and comforting about the way it moves. Unsettling because it belongs here more than you do. Comforting because it exists at all. Animals in this landscape feel like proof that the world has not entirely emptied. There is a well-known pattern in historical accounts from cold regions. Animals often navigate winter conditions with a kind of efficiency that humans struggle to match. Dogs in particular have been used for travel guidance and survival across vast snowy terrains. Their ability to sense direction, detect safe paths, and endure cold made them invaluable companions. This one is not your companion. It does not slow. It does not turn toward you. It crosses the frozen path and continues into the open snow beyond its form, gradually fading into the storm until it becomes just another suggestion of movement, then nothing at all. You stand there for a moment longer than necessary. Then you look down at your own feet. Your steps are heavier, less certain. You press forward again. The ice creaks faintly beneath you, but it holds. You follow the gentle curve of your path, now marked only by your own cautious movement and the fading memory of where the animal had been. A thought forms uninvited. It knew where it was going. You do not. You exhale, slowly pushing the thought aside. Comparison is not useful. You continue. Your body has settled into a quieter state now. Not comfortable, but adapted. The cold is no longer a sharp intrusion. It is a constant presence woven into every sensation. Your hands feel distant. Your feet, though still moving, respond with a delay that you cannot quite ignore. You flex your fingers again. The motion is slower, less precise. You tuck them deeper under your arms as you walk, conserving what warmth you can. There is a curious piece of old knowledge from various winter travelling traditions. Some people believe that observing animal behaviour could reveal safe routes nearby shelter or changes in weather. Birds taking flight, animals moving in groups, sudden silence among wildlife. Each was interpreted as a sign, though not always accurately. You wonder briefly if following that animal would have led somewhere, or nowhere at all. You will not find out. The frozen path continues to guide you, and for now that is enough. You take another step. The ice shifts slightly beneath you. Not a crack, not a break. Just a subtle movement, a reminder that this surface is not entirely fixed. You pause, listening. Nothing follows. You continue, but your steps are even more careful now. The storm seems to thicken again, the falling snow growing denser, the air more crowded. Visibility shrinks further, reducing the world to a small circle around you. The path ahead fades into a pale blur, and the edges of the frozen surface become harder to distinguish from the surrounding snow. You slow down. Each step becomes a decision again. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about how humans perceive and respond to environmental cues in extreme conditions. Some suggest that familiarity with an environment allows for more intuitive navigation. Others argue that when conditions become severe enough, even familiarity offers limited advantage. You suspect the latter is winning here. You take another step. The ice holds. Another, still holds. Your confidence does not grow, but your acceptance does. This is the path. This is the condition. This is what you have. You keep moving, and then faintly you hear something. A sound distant and indistinct. You stop. The wind carries it unevenly, stretching it thin, bending it around the contours of the land. It is not sharp enough to identify immediately. Not a crack, not a voice. You listen harder. There, a soft rhythmic tone. Faint, almost lost beneath the storm. You tilt your head, focusing, trying to isolate it from the constant whisper of snow. It comes again. A low, distant sound. Regular. Measured. You feel a small shift inside you. Not relief, not yet, but recognition. A sound that does not belong to the storm. You stand still listening, letting it come again, hoping it will clarify itself. It does not. It remains just beyond certainty, a suggestion of something human, or perhaps mechanical, or perhaps something else entirely. But it is there. And in a world that has been stripped of direction, even the faintest hint of something repeating, something structured, feels like the beginning of a map. You take a slow breath. Then carefully you turn your body toward the direction where the sound seems strongest, and you step forward. You turn toward the sound gently, as if sudden movement might scare it away. It continues faint but steady, carried unevenly through the snow-thickened air. Not loud enough to guide you cleanly, not clear enough to identify with confidence, just present, repeating, structured. That alone makes it valuable. You take a step in its direction. The ice beneath you creaks softly, and you pause, instinct tightening again. The frozen surface, which had begun to feel almost cooperative, reminds you of its true nature. It is not a path. It is an agreement that can end without warning. You adjust your weight, then continue. Step. The sound comes again. Low. Measured. You try to count the space between each occurrence, but the wind distorts it, stretches it, shortens it. Still there is rhythm there, not natural, not random. Something with intention behind it. You move toward it. The snow thickens again, drifting across the frozen surface in shallow waves. At times, the edge of the ice disappears, entirely blending into the surrounding white so completely that you cannot tell where it ends. You keep your gaze downward, watching for any change in texture, any hint that you are stepping onto less stable ground. Your body feels different now, not just tired, simplified. The cold has taken away layers of sensation. Your hands no longer ache the way they did earlier. They feel distant. Your fingers move when you tell them to, but without urgency, without clarity. Your feet follow a similar pattern, present, but not detailed. There is a quiet danger in that. Accounts from cold weather exposure often describe this shift where discomfort gives way to numbness, and numbness can feel deceptively calm. The body overwhelmed begins to reduce signals it sends. Pain fades. Urgency softens. A kind of false ease replaces it. You notice it, which is good, but noticing does not reverse it. You flex your hands again more deliberately this time, forcing movement, forcing awareness. The response is slow, but it comes. You stamp one foot lightly, then the other, trying to bring sensation back into your legs. The sound reaches you again, closer now, still unclear, but stronger. You stop. Listen. It comes again. A hollow tone perhaps, or something striking something else. Not sharp like metal, not soft like cloth, somewhere in between. You take another step. The ice shifts slightly. You freeze! This time the movement beneath your foot feels more pronounced. Not a crack, not a break, but a subtle flex, as if the surface has adjusted to your weight in a way it did not before. You hold still. Your breath slows. Nothing follows. Carefully you shift your weight back then forward again, testing the response. It holds, but the message is clear. This path is changing. There is a lesser known but practical detail recorded in winter travel accounts. Ice thickness can vary significantly across even short distances influenced by current's depth and underlying terrain. What holds firmly in one place may weaken only a few steps away. Snow cover can hide these variations, completely removing the visual cues that might otherwise warn you. You take a step slightly to the side. The surface feels firmer there. You adjust your direction, angling gently toward where the sound seems strongest, while also favouring the more stable footing. It is a compromise. Everything is a compromise now. The sound comes again, closer. You begin to recognise a pattern. Not perfectly, but enough. A pause, a tone, a pause, a tone. You tilt your head slightly, listening between your own breaths, between the soft hiss of falling snow. It could be a bell. You hesitate at the thought. Not a large one, not the kind that rings out clearly across open land. Something smaller, duller, perhaps partially obstructed by weather or distance. But a bell nonetheless. In many rural communities, bells served practical purposes beyond their more obvious roles. They marked time-signalled gatherings, warned of danger-guided travellers. In harsh weather, even a faint bell could mean the difference between finding shelter and wandering past it entirely. You feel a small shift inside you. Not relief. Not yet, but direction. You move again more carefully now, balancing the need to follow the sound with the need to remain on stable ground. Your steps are slower, more deliberate. Each placement of your foot is tested before you commit fully. The ice creaks once more. You pause. Listen. Nothing breaks. You continue. The sound grows clearer with each step, though still softened by the storm. It does not guide you in a straight line. The wind bends, it carries it unevenly. Sometimes it seems directly ahead, other times slightly to the side. You adjust constantly. Small corrections, small decisions. Your body feels heavier. Not just from effort, from something else. A quiet dullness settling into your movements. Your arms hang closer to your sides, now less actively engaged. Your posture shifts slightly forward, conserving energy, though you're not fully aware of the change. There is a continuing discussion among experts about how cold exposure influences posture and movement patterns. Some suggest that the body instinctively minimizes energy expenditure, even at the cost of balance or awareness. Others point to neurological effects where coordination begins to degrade subtly over time. You take another step. Your foot lands slightly off balance. You correct quickly, but the movement feels slower than it should. You pause, focus. You take a breath, then another. The bell sounds again. Clearer now. You look ahead. Through the snow, through the dimness, something begins to take shape. Not fully visible. Not yet, but different. A vertical line. Then another. Not trees, something more regular, more structured. You blink, trying to sharpen the image. It remains indistinct, but the pattern is there. Upright forms spaced in a way that feels intentional. The bell sounds again, and this time you're certain. It is not the storm. It is not the forest. It is something made. You take another step toward it. The ice holds. The sound continues. And for the first time since the path vanished, since the horizon disappeared, since the storm erased every clear direction, you're not moving through uncertainty alone. Something is there, and you are getting closer. The shape ahead does not become clearer all at once. It reveals itself slowly, reluctantly, as if it is deciding whether you're worth the effort. The vertical lines you noticed begin to separate into individual forms, posts perhaps, or beams. Something upright repeating with a faint sense of structure behind it. And the sound continues. A dull bell, steady, patient. You move toward it. Carefully. The ice beneath your feet still carries that faint, uneasy flexibility, and you do not forget it. Each step is tested. Each shift of weight is measured. But your focus is divided now. Part of you watches the ground. The rest reaches forward toward that distant human-made rhythm. Step. The bell sounds. Step. Pause. The air feels colder again, though perhaps that is only your awareness sharpening. The wind crosses the frozen surface in thin, restless streams, carrying loose snow that skims past your boots and ankles. You can feel it brushing against your legs, a constant whispering contact that never quite settles. You draw your arms closer. Your hands, though still moving, feel almost detached now. You flex your fingers again, but the motion is slow, as though your commands must travel farther than they used to. You tuck them deeper under your arms, pressing them against your sides, trying to borrow warmth from whatever remains. The bell sounds again. Closer. You stop just for a moment to listen more carefully. It is clearer now. Not loud, not bright, but unmistakably deliberate. A small bell perhaps suspended from a simple frame, moving just enough in the wind to strike its own edge. Or perhaps something is causing it to move, something unseen. You resume walking. The shapes ahead grow more defined. Posts, yes. Wooden, weathered, standing in a rough line. Between them faint horizontal traces, as if something once connected them more completely. A fence, perhaps. Larger than the broken one you passed earlier. More intact, though still softened by snow and time. You approach it slowly. The ice beneath you begins to change, subtly at first. The surface feels less smooth, less uniform. Your steps produce a slightly different sound, a softer compression, as if the layer beneath the snow has shifted from solid ice to something more mixed. You pause, test your weight. The ground holds, but the sensation is different. Less hollow, more grounded. You take another step. The same. You glance down, brushing a small patch of snow aside with your boot. Beneath the surface is uneven. Not the clear, hard sheen of ice, but a mixture of frozen earth and compacted snow. You have reached the edge of the waterway. You step forward again, leaving the frozen path behind. The change is immediate. Your foot sinks more deeply, the snow offering resistance rather than support. It is harder to walk here, but also more certain. The ground does not shift beneath you. It does not creak. It simply holds. You move toward the fence. The posts rise before you, now dark against the pale surroundings. Snow clings to their sides, softening their edges, filling the spaces between them. The horizontal rails are partially buried, but enough remains to suggest a boundary, a deliberate marking of space. You reach out and touch one. The wood is rough, cold, solid. You feel that same quiet grounding you experienced before, but stronger now. This is not a fragment. This is a structure. Not whole, not perfect, but intentional. The bell sounds again. Very close. You turn your head, following the direction of the sound. There, just beyond the fence, slightly to your left, a small frame rises from the snow. 2 upright posts connected at the top by a simple crossbeam. From that beam hangs a bell, modest in size, its surface dulled by weather and time. It sways gently in the wind. Each movement produces that soft, hollow tone you have been following. You stand there looking at it. For a moment you do nothing. The sight feels almost surreal. After so much emptiness, so much uncertainty here is something so clearly made, so clearly placed by human hands. You step closer. The snow deepens around the fence, drifting against its base. You move carefully, lifting your legs higher, pushing through the resistance. The effort is noticeable now. Your breath comes heavier, your movements slower. You reach the bell. It hangs at about chest height, suspended by a simple loop of metal or rope. You can see where it has worn slightly over time, the constant movement against its support leaving faint marks. You do not touch it. Not yet. Instead you look beyond it. Through the falling snow past the fence there is something else. A shape. Low. Dark. Partially obscured. A structure perhaps. A building. Or what remains of one. You narrow your eyes trying to focus. The outline is faint, softened by distance and weather, but it is there. A roofline sloping under the weight of snow. Walls barely distinguishable from the surrounding landscape. A shelter. Maybe. You feel something shift inside you again. Stronger this time. Not relief. Not yet. But something close. There is a small, almost peculiar historical note that in some rural areas bells like this were used not only for signalling, but also for marking boundaries or entrances. A simple way to announce presence to guide those who might be lost or to warn of something ahead. In winter, their sound could carry just far enough to be useful, just faint enough to require attention. You glance at the bell again. It sways gently, rings softly. You wonder how long it has been here, how many storms it has endured, how many people, if any, have followed its sound. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how isolated rural structures were used or abandoned over time, especially in harsh climates. Some were seasonal, occupied only during certain months. Others were left behind as population shifted, leaving fragments of human presence scattered across the landscape. You do not know which this is. Occupied, abandoned, safe, or not. You take a slow breath. The structure beyond the fence waits silent and distinct, offering no clear invitation, no visible sign of life. But it is something more than snow, something more than trees, something that might hold warmth or at least block the wind. You look down at your hands. They move when you tell them to, but slowly. You look at your feet. They carry you but with effort. You look at the bell, still ringing, still steady, and you realize that standing here deciding is not a luxury you can afford for long. The cold does not pause for careful consideration. It simply continues. You lift your foot, step toward the fence, and whatever waits beyond it. You step over the lower rail of the fence with more effort than expected. Your boot catches slightly against the wood, and you have to pause, steadying yourself with one gloved hand against a post. The movement feels slower than it should, less precise. You take a breath, correct your balance, and bring your other leg through carefully. On the other side, the snow is deeper, untouched or nearly so. Each step sinks, presses and resists before releasing your foot again. The effort pulls at your legs, drawing energy in small but persistent amounts. You adjust your pace instinctively, shorter steps, now more deliberate, conserving what you can. The bell continues behind you, soft and steady. It feels different now. Before it was a guide, a direction. Now it becomes something else. A marker, a point you have passed. You resist the urge to turn back toward it. Not because you think it will vanish, but because you understand that hesitation has a cost. Ahead, the shape of the structure grows clearer. A low building, perhaps a hut or a small outbuilding. The roof slopes unevenly under the weight of accumulated snow, one side dipping slightly more than the other. The walls are dark weathered wood, their edges softened by drifting snow that has gathered against them over time. No light, no smoke, no movement. You continue toward it. There is a quiet, familiar thought that begins to drift through your mind as you approach. What if it is empty? Not dramatic, not fearful, just practical. Empty buildings are not always useless. They can still offer shelter from wind, a place to rest, a barrier against falling snow. But they also carry uncertainty, structural weakness, hidden damage, cold interiors that may not be much warmer than the storm outside. Still, it is something, and something is better than nothing. You step closer. The ground shifts slightly beneath the snow here, less even than before. Perhaps a yard or the remnants of one. You feel subtle variations underfoot. Hard patches, soft dips. The ghost of a space that once had purpose. You pause briefly, looking at the building more carefully. The door is there. Closed. A simple wooden plank construction set into the wall without ornament. Snow has gathered at its base, partially burying the lower edge. The handle, if there is one, is not immediately visible beneath the thin layer of ice and frost that has formed over it. You approach slowly. There is a curious detail from accounts of winter travellers who encountered isolated structures. Many describe a moment of hesitation before entering, even when the need for shelter was obvious. Not out of superstition necessarily, but out of uncertainty. Who built it? Who used it? Who might still claim it? You understand that hesitation now. You stand before the door, your breath rising in faint clouds. The silence here is different. Heavier. The building blocks the wind slightly, creating a small pocket of stillness. The snow falls more gently in this space, settling without the constant push of air. It feels contained. You reach out. Your hand touches the door. The wood is cold, stiff, slightly rough beneath your fingers. You press gently, testing it. It does not move. You push a little harder. The door resists at first, then shifts with a dull, reluctant sound. Snow at the base cracks and falls away in small clumps. The hinges creak softly, a dry, strained noise that echoes faintly in the quiet. You pause again, listening. Nothing answers. No movement inside. No voice. No sign that the space is occupied. You push the door open further. A narrow gap reveals darkness within, not complete darkness. A faint grey light filters in from the doorway, just enough to outline shapes inside. Rough beams, a low ceiling, perhaps a bench or a table against one wall. You step forward, carefully. Your boot crosses the threshold. The air inside feels still, colder than you expected, but different from outside. Less movement, less intrusion. The wind does not reach here. The snow does not fall directly upon you. You step fully inside and turn slightly, pulling the door inward behind you. It closes with a soft, uneven thud. The bell outside continues faint, now filtered through wood and distance. You stand still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The interior reveals itself slowly. A small space. Bare. Functional. The floor is packed earth or worn wood, difficult to tell beneath a thin layer of frost that has formed over it. The walls are simple planks, their surfaces darkened by age and exposure. A narrow opening on one side, perhaps a window, but it is partially covered, allowing only a dim, diffused light to enter. There is no fire, no warmth beyond what your own body carries, but there is shelter, and that matters. You take a few steps further in your boots, sounding different now against the floor, less muffled, more defined. The change in sound feels almost surprising after so long in the snow. You look around. a bench as you thought. Rough sturdy set against one wall, a small table uneven, one leg slightly shorter than the others. In the corner a pile of something wood perhaps, or debris. It is difficult to tell in the low light. There is a faint smell here. Old wood, cold air, and something else. Subtle, faint, not fresh but not entirely gone. Smoke! You inhale slowly. Yes, there was a fire here once. Not recently, but not so long ago that the scent has completely vanished. You feel that quiet shift again. Stronger now. A sense that this place, however abandoned it may seem, has known warmth. There is a long-standing discussion among historians about how temporary shelters like this were used across different regions. Some served as seasonal huts occupied during specific times of year. Others were way stations used intermittently by travellers, hunters or workers. Their condition could vary widely from well-maintained to nearly forgotten. You do not know which this is, but it exists, and for now it is enough. You move toward the bench. Your legs feel heavy as you lower yourself onto it, the motion slower than it should be. You sit carefully, your body adjusting to the change in position. The wood beneath you is cold, unyielding, but it supports your weight without question. You exhale. Long, slow. The storm continues outside. You can hear it faintly, the soft hiss of snow against the walls, the occasional creak of the structure as the wind presses against it. Inside there is stillness. Not warmth, not comfort, but a pause. And after everything you have walked through, even a pause feels like something worth holding on to. You sit for a while, though time has stopped behaving in a way you can measure. The bench beneath you is hard, the air inside the hut only slightly less hostile than outside, and yet the difference feels meaningful. Your shoulders lower a fraction. Your breathing finds a steadier pace. Even your thoughts, which had been drifting like snow across an empty field, begin to gather again into something more solid. The bell outside continues. Faint now, muted by wood and distance but still present. It reassures you in a quiet, almost stubborn way. As long as it rings, the world beyond this hut has not entirely dissolved into silence. You look around again more carefully this time. The shapes inside the structure resolve a little more as your eyes adjust. The table is indeed uneven, its surface worn smooth in some places, rough in others. There are shallow marks across it, perhaps from tools or repeated use. The pile in the corner is wood split roughly, though not stacked with care. Some pieces are dry, others are damp, their surfaces darkened. Firewood, or at least what once served as it. You lean forward slightly, resting your elbows on your knees. Your hands hang between them, fingers curled loosely, slow to respond when you flex them again. The numbness has not improved. If anything, it has deepened. There is less discomfort now, which you recognize as a problem rather than a relief. There is a well-established observation in cold exposure cases. As body temperature drops, the sensation of pain can diminish, replaced by a deceptive sense of calm or indifference. It is one of the more dangerous tricks the body plays by easing the urgency at precisely the moment it should be increasing. You straighten a little, forcing yourself to stay alert. Your gaze drifts toward the pile of wood again. Fire, the idea arrives slowly, then settles firmly. You look around the hut for anything that might help. A hearth, perhaps, a fire pit, something. There near the far wall, a shallow depression lined with stones blackened by soot. Above it, the wood of the wall is darker, stained by smoke that once rose and escaped through a small opening near the roof. This place was used, not recently, but not so long ago that the traces have vanished. You stand. The motion feels heavier now, your legs slower to respond, but they hold. You step toward the fire pit, each footfall more deliberate than before. The air near the stones carries that faint scent of old smoke, again stronger here. It is dry, almost comforting, though it offers no warmth. You crouch, carefully. Your knees protest slightly, your balance uncertain for a moment, but you steady yourself with one hand against the wall. The wood pile is within reach. You pick up a piece. It is light. Too light. You turn it in your hand, pressing your thumb against its surface. It is dry but brittle, old. It might burn, but not well, not for long. You pick up another. Heavier. Damp. Less promising. You set them down again, your movements slow and slightly clumsy. There is a curious historical detail that many travellers carried small fire-starting kits, often including flint and steel or other simple tools. Fire was not a luxury. It was a necessity, especially in cold conditions. Without it, shelter alone could only do so much. You check your pockets, or whatever you carry. Your fingers search, fumbling slightly. Nothing. No flint. No steel. No easy solution. You exhale slowly. Of course, the universe or history or whatever quiet force is observing this moment has decided to remain consistent. You sit back slightly still, crouch near the fire pit. The idea of fire remains, but without means it becomes something else. A concept, a memory, not a tool. You look around again. The hut is small enough that you can take it in fully now. No hidden corners, no unexpected supplies. Just the bare essentials of a structure that once served a purpose and now exists in a kind of suspended state. You shift your weight, rising again. Your legs feel heavier this time. You move back to the bench and sit once more carefully now, as if aware that each motion carries a cost. Your body settles into the position with a quiet reluctance. You lean back slightly, your shoulders resting against the wall. The wood is cold, but still, you close your eyes again just for a moment. The darkness feels thicker now, more complete. Your thoughts drift. Not far, just enough to touch something beyond the immediate. You remember the fence, the bell, the frozen path, the animal crossing your way, small fragments connected by effort by chance. There is a long-standing academic discussion about the role of chance in survival situations. Some argue that preparation and skill are the dominant factors. Others suggest that random elements, small coincidences, can have disproportionate effects on outcomes. A path appearing, a structure standing, a sound carrying just far enough. You open your eyes again. The hut remains. The storm continues. You're here. For now. You shift your hands again, pressing them under your arms, trying to hold on to what little warmth remains. Your breathing slows your body, settling into a quieter state. The bell outside sounds again. Faint, distant, steady, and you realize something quietly important. You're no longer walking without direction. You have stopped, and in that stillness the question is no longer where to go next. It is whether you have enough strength to go anywhere at all. You sit there longer than you intend to. At first it feels like a short pause. A moment to gather yourself, to let your breathing slow, to let your body recover from the steady drain of movement through snow and cold. But the longer you remain still, the more the stillness begins to settle into you. That is the danger. Not dramatic, not immediate, just quiet. Your hands remain tucked beneath your arms, your shoulders slightly hunched, your head lowered. The position feels natural now, as though your body has chosen it for you. You notice that you're no longer adjusting constantly, no longer flexing your fingers as often, no longer shifting your feet to bring back sensation. You are conserving energy, which sounds wise, but it also feels easier than it should. You open your eyes fully again and look around the hut, forcing yourself to take in the details once more. The rough grain of the wooden walls, the uneven table, the shallow fire pit that remains stubbornly cold, the faint grey light filtering through the narrow opening. You need to stay aware. There is a recorded pattern in cold exposure cases where individuals begin to feel an unusual sense of calm, even contentment, as their body temperature drops. It is not comfort in the true sense, more like a softening of urgency, a quiet release of tension that can make it difficult to recognize danger for what it is. You shift your posture deliberately. Sit upright. Move your arms. Flex your fingers. The movements are slower now, less precise, but they respond. That is something. You bring your hands out from beneath your arms and look at them. They do not look much different, but they feel distant. You press your thumb into your palm, then release. The sensation is faint, delayed. You rub your hands together more firmly this time, creating friction, forcing warmth, forcing awareness. It helps. A little. You glance toward the door. Closed, the faint sound of the bell continues beyond it, steady as before. It has become part of the background now, something constant, something that does not require your attention to exist. That too is a change. Earlier it was a guide. Now it is simply there. You stand. The motion is slower than before, your legs taking a moment to respond. You push yourself up carefully, using the wall for support. Once upright, you pause, letting your balance settle. Your body feels heavier, not just tired, weighted, as if each movement must push through something unseen. You take a step, then another. The floor beneath your boots feels solid, dependable, in a way the snow never was. You move toward the far side of the hut, toward the narrow opening that lets in what little light remains. You peer through it. The storm continues. The world outside is still a shifting blur of white and grey, the trees barely visible beyond the immediate space around the hut. The bell hangs where you left it, swaying gently, its motion steady, predictable. Beyond that, nothing. No movement. No figures. No sign of change. You exhale slowly. The thought of going back out there feels distant now, not impossible, just less immediate. The urgency that pushed you forward before has softened, replaced by something quieter. You lean your head slightly against the edge of the opening, the wood cold against your temple. Your mind drifts again. This time it moves more easily. You think about paths. Not the one you followed across the ice, not the faint line through the snow, but older paths. The ones people carried in memory. Routes described in stories passed down through generations, learned not by maps but by repetition. In many traditional societies, navigation relied heavily on remembered landmarks, patterns in the land, even the direction of prevailing winds or the behaviour of animals. These mental maps were not always written down. They lived in the mind, shaped by experience, reinforced by repetition. But those maps required something you no longer have. Visibility, familiarity, context. Here now, those internal maps have nothing to attach to. The land offers no recognizable features, no consistent markers. Memory becomes less useful when the world refuses to resemble what you remember. You push yourself away from the opening and turn back into the hut. The interior feels smaller now, not physically, but in your perception. The walls seem closer, the ceiling lower, the space more confined. It is not uncomfortable exactly, but it is noticeable. You take a few slow steps across the room, then stop. Your balance wavers slightly. You correct it, but the delay is there. You notice it. There is a lesser known but documented phenomenon where prolonged exposure to cold can affect coordination and balance, even before more severe symptoms appear. Fine motor skills degrade, first followed by larger movements. The body becomes less precise, less responsive. You test your footing again, carefully. It holds, but the uncertainty remains. You move back to the bench and sit once more slowly than before. The act of sitting feels heavier, as though your body is negotiating with gravity, rather than simply yielding to it. You rest your hands on your knees. Look down at them. They feel like objects, attached, useful, but not entirely yours. You flex your fingers again. They move. That is enough. For now, there is ongoing academic conversation about how much awareness individuals retain as hypothermia progresses. Some accounts suggest a gradual loss of clarity, while others describe moments of surprising lucidity, even in advanced stages. It is not entirely predictable, which makes it difficult to rely on any single expectation. You lift your head again. The hut remains unchanged. The storm continues. The bell sounds. Steady, unmoved. You take a slow breath, then another, and you realize quietly that the map you're following now is no longer external. It is internal. A series of small decisions. Move, stay, breathe, focus. Each one leading to the next, not toward a destination you can see, but away from a stillness that feels just a little too easy to accept. The bell continues its soft rhythm outside, and each faint note seems to travel through the hut more slowly now, touching the walls, the floor, the cold air, and finally you. You listen without moving. The sound has become strangely large in your mind. Not loud, large. It fills the spaces where certainty used to be. It gives shape to the silence. It reminds you that beyond these walls the storm is still moving, still covering, still altering the world one flake at a time. You sit upright again because slumping feels too inviting. Your body would like to fold, inward, conserve heat, become small and quiet. Sensible in one way, dangerous in another. So you straighten your back against the wall, rub your hands together, and let your thoughts move outward away from the cramped hut, away from your numb toes and heavy arms toward all the other storms that once caught human plans by the throat and squeezed gently until history changed course. Snowstorms rarely ask permission to matter. They arrive across roads, campaigns, farms, mountain passes and sea coasts, and suddenly all the confident diagrams of generals, merchants, kings, messengers and ordinary people become suggestions. Weather does not care how elegant the plan looked on paper. It does not care that someone packed a speech, sharpened a sword, bought a mule or promised to be home by Thursday. It simply falls. One familiar historical example rises in your mind. Napoleon's retreat from Russia in 1812 became infamous partly because of brutal winter conditions, along with hunger disease, exhaustion, and military pressure. The cold did not act alone, but it deepened every weakness. Soldiers who had marched as part of a vast imperial machine found themselves reduced to the same basic questions you face now. Where is shelter? Where is food? Can I keep walking? Empires are very impressive until everyone needs dry socks. You breathe out softly, almost laughing, though the sound is faint. The hut creaks above you. Snow slides from the roof in a muffled rush, landing outside with a soft thud. You look up alert for a moment. The roof holds. The silence returns. You think of armies crossing mountain passes, their banners stiff with frost horses, trembling wagons stuck in drifts. You think of messengers delayed until news became useless. You think of villages cut off for days, farms buried, rivers turned into roads, roads turned into traps. Snow does not only change direction, it changes time. It slows messages. It delays markets. It cancels ambitions. It gives one group warning and another group confusion. And in this hut the truth feels personal. Your own journey has been reduced to fragments. Ash, footprints, trees, hunger, bell, shelter. Not a grand campaign, not a famous disaster, just one person in a storm discovering that history is not only made in palaces and battlefields. Sometimes it is made in the moment when someone turns left because a sound carried through snow. There is a strange little tidbit from military history that some armies use snow itself to hide movement mass tracks or confuse enemies, while others were betrayed by the same white cover that preserved footprints too clearly. Snow could conceal or reveal, protect or expose. Very loyal of it to no one in particular. You shift your feet again, pressing them against the floor. The sensation is dull but present. Good. You hold on to that. Outside, the wind rises slightly. The bell answers, ringing a little faster for a few breaths before settling again. The sound pulls your attention back to the room. You look toward the door, imagining the world beyond it. The fence half buried. The frozen stream. The dark line of forest. The old path you lost, all of it now changing under fresh layers of snow. By morning, if morning comes clearly, the landscape may be different enough that your memory will not match it. That thought unsettles you. Human beings often imagine landscapes as stable, but winter proves otherwise. Fields become plains, ditches vanish, rivers become corridors, boundaries soften. The world rearranges itself without moving an inch beneath the surface. A traveller who knew the summer route could still become lost in January because the land had put on another face. Researchers still disagree about how much climate and sudden weather events shaped particular historical turning points compared with leadership, logistics and chance. Some warn against blaming weather too neatly. because snowstorms do not make decisions by themselves. Others argue that ignoring weather makes history falsely tidy, as if people act in empty rooms rather than muddy fields, frozen roads and hungry bodies. You understand both sides. The storm did not choose your path for you, but it removed many of your choices. That distinction matters. You rub your arms, slowly keeping circulation moving. The fabric of your sleeves feels stiff where melted snow is dampened and cooled. Your shoulders ache. Your stomach feels hollow, though the hunger has become less sharp, more distant. That worries you a little. A quiet stomach is not always a satisfied one. You stand again, not because you plan to leave immediately, but because you need movement. You push up from the bench, steady yourself, and take slow steps across the hut. One wall to the other. Turn. Back again. The space is small, so each crossing is brief, but it helps. Your legs complain, then warm slightly through motion. The floor creaks under your boots. Outside the bell rings. Inside you pace. There is something almost ceremonial about it, though not dignified enough to be painted. More like a tired pilgrim doing laps in a shed while history pretends not to watch. Still, movement is movement. Heat is heat. Survival is not always elegant. You think of migrations shaped by winter. Families waiting for thaw before crossing passes. Refugees forced onward despite snow. Traders reading the season like a book, knowing when a route would open and when it would close. In some places, snow connected communities by making frozen rivers passable. In others, it isolated them completely. The same weather that trapped one person could carry another swiftly home. That is the uncomfortable thing about storms. They are not symbols with one meaning. They are conditions. They meet each life differently. For the powerful, snow might delay a campaign. For the poor, it might decide whether stored grain lasts. For the traveller, it might erase the road. For the child at home, it might be beautiful through a window. History can be very rude that way, allowing one person's scenery to become another person's emergency. You pause near the narrow window opening and look out. Visibility is poor, but you can still see the bell moving. Beyond it, almost nothing. The world has shrunk to the radius of a few dim shapes, and yet in your mind the storm has expanded. It stretches across centuries now, touching armies, villages, borders, harvests. Ships trapped in ice mountain passes closed by drifts and nameless walkers who never appeared in chronicles. You are one small figure inside that much larger weather. You take another slow breath. The cold remains. The danger remains. But so does the hut. So does the bell. So does your ability for this moment to stand, listen, and choose one more careful movement. You stop pacing not because you are finished, but because something inside you shifts again. Not dramatically. Just enough. Your body, which had accepted the slow rhythm of movement across the hut, now feels heavier when you pause. The stillness presses more firmly than before, as if it has been waiting patiently for you to give it permission. You lean one hand against the wall. The wood is cold but steady. You take a breath, then another. The bell continues outside, steady as ever, though you notice now that it no longer draws you the way it did before. Its rhythm has become familiar, almost background. Your mind does not reach for it automatically anymore. It is simply part of the environment, like the creak of the hut or the faint hiss of snow against the walls. That realization unsettles you slightly, not because the bell has changed, but because you have. You push yourself away from the wall and take a slow step forward. Then another. Your balance wavers just a little. You correct it, though the correction feels slower than it should. There is a delay between intention and action, now small but noticeable. You stop again. Focus. The floor beneath your boots is firm, but your sense of it feels distant. As though you're receiving information through a layer of cloth rather than directly. You stamp your foot once. The sound is dull, muted. You do it again, harder this time. The vibration travels upward faintly. You feel it, but not clearly. You exhale slowly. This is not ideal. There is a documented pattern in cold exposure where coordination begins to degrade, alongside sensation making simple movements less reliable. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it appears as small missteps, slight delays, subtle imbalance. You are beginning to notice those signs. You take another step, carefully. Your foot lands where you intend it to, but the confidence is not there. You pause, letting your weight settle fully before moving again. The hut feels smaller now, not physically, but in what it offers. You look round again. The bench, the table, the cold fire pit. Nothing has changed. And yet something has. The shelter that once felt like a pause now feels like a place where time might slip away too easily. You understand quietly that staying here is no longer as safe as it seemed. Not because the hut is dangerous, but because stillness is. You turn toward the door. The motion is slow, deliberate. Each step carries a small cost, a little more effort than before. Your legs feel heavy, your arms less responsive. You keep them close to your body, conserving what warmth remains. You reach the door. Your hand finds the edge fingers curling around the wood. The sensation is faint but present. You push gently. The door resists for a moment, then opens with that same dull, reluctant sound. Cold air enters immediately, sharper than before, more direct. You step forward out into it. The transition is abrupt. The shelter had muted, the storm softened it. Outside it returns in full. Snow brushes against your face, your clothing, your hands. The wind slips through every small gap it can find. You take a breath. It feels colder than before. Or perhaps you feel it more clearly. The bell hangs to your right, swaying gently. Its sound is clearer again now that you're outside the rhythm, steady, predictable. You look past it. The world remains a blur. Trees barely visible. The fence half buried. The frozen path somewhere beyond. No clear direction. No visible road. And yet you stand here. You have a choice. Stay or move. There is a curious detail from accounts of people lost in winter conditions. Some describe a moment where the struggle to find direction gives way to a kind of acceptance. Not surrender exactly, more like a shift in perspective. Instead of searching for the correct path, they simply continue moving, trusting that movement itself is better than stillness. You feel the edge of that shift now. The need to choose a perfect direction has faded. The need to move remains. You take a step, not toward anything specific, just forward. The snow resists, but you push through it. Another step. Your body follows slower than before, but still capable. The bell sounds behind you. You do not turn back. You continue. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about how decision-making changes under prolonged stress and environmental pressure. Some suggest that individuals simplify their choices, focusing on immediate actions rather than long-term outcomes. Others argue that this simplification is not a loss of reasoning, but an adaptation to limited resources. You suspect it is both. You're no longer planning a route. You are taking steps, one at a time, each one chosen because it exists. The fence fades behind you. The bell grows quieter. The hut becomes just another shape in the storm, then less than that. You move through the snow, your pace slow, your steps deliberate. The ground shifts beneath you, sometimes firm, sometimes soft. You adjust without thinking, your body responding more than your mind directs. Your thoughts drift again, but differently now, less scattered, more distant. You're aware of them, but not fully engaged. They pass through, touching lightly, then moving on. The cold remains, the weight remains, but the urgency has softened. You continue walking, not because you know where you are going, but because stopping feels like something you're not ready to do. Not yet, and so you move. Through snow, through dimness, through a world that offers no clear direction. One step, then another. At first you do not notice the change. Your steps continue slow and measured, pressing through the snow with that same steady effort. Your breath rises and fades. The cold remains a constant companion, neither sharper nor softer, just present. But something shifts. Not in you, in the world. You pause, and there is a shape ahead, not imagined this time. Not drifting or dissolving at the edges. It holds. You narrow your eyes, focusing through the falling snow. It is dark, vertical, still a line against the pale moving background. You take a step toward it, then another. The shape does not move. It doesn't blur into nothing. It remains. That alone feels unusual now. You approach slowly, your body leaning forward slightly, your balance adjusting with each step. The snow resists as always, but you push through, drawn toward this single point of certainty. As you get closer, the shape resolves. A tree, not like the others, larger, older. Its trunk thick, its bark deeply ridged dark against the white that gathers in its creases. Its branches spread wider, heavier, catching more snow, forming a kind of canopy above. You reach it. Your hand presses against the trunk. Solid, unmistakable. You stand there for a moment, your forehead nearly touching the bark, your breath rising between you and the tree in faint, fading clouds. It feels real. More real than anything else has for a while. You circle it slowly. The ground around the base is slightly different. The snow is disturbed here, though not recently. Shallow depressions, uneven, as if something or someone had moved around this space before. You look beyond it, and then you see it. Another shape. Lower, angular, not as faint as before. You blink. It remains. You take a step, then another. The shape grows clearer. A fence. Not broken this time. More complete. Posts standing upright in a line, their tops uneven but intact. Horizontal rails partially buried but still visible connecting them. You move toward it. Your steps feel heavier now, but the direction feels certain in a way it has not for a long time. You reach the fence and place your hand on it. The wood is cold, but it is there. You follow it with your eyes. It stretches to one side, then the other, disappearing into the snow, but clearly part of something larger. You turn, and then beyond it you see more. A roofline. Faint, but unmistakable. You take a breath. Slow. Careful. You move along the fence, your hand trailing against the wood, using it for balance as much as direction. The contact helps grounding you, giving your body something to rely on that is not shifting or uncertain. Step, step. The fence leads you. Or perhaps you follow it. It hardly matters. The structure ahead becomes clearer with each step. A building, larger than the hut, more defined. Its roof slopes evenly, though heavy with snow. The walls stand straight, their edges sharper, less softened by time and weather. You stop. Just for a moment. The sight of it feels significant, not just shelter. Something more. You move closer. The ground here is firmer, the snow less deep. Perhaps it has been disturbed more often. Perhaps the wind has shaped it differently. You reach the edge of what might be a yard. The fence curves slightly, enclosing the space. You step through an opening. Your boots press into the snow, but with less resistance now. The surface feels more compact, more stable. You approach the building. A door is visible, closed, a small window beside it dark. No light, no movement. You stand there looking at it. Your breath rises, fades. You listen. Nothing. No voices. No sounds from within. Only the faint distant bell behind you still ringing somewhere in the storm. You take a step closer, then another. Your hand lifts, reaches for the door, pauses. There is a moment here, a quiet one, where everything feels balanced. Behind you the storm, the hut, the bell, the long uncertain path. Ahead of you a structure, a possibility. You do not know what waits inside. You do not know if it is safer, warmer, occupied, empty, but it is something. And something you have learned is enough to keep moving. You press your hand against the door. The wood is cold beneath your fingers. You push. It does not move at first. Then slowly it gives. The hinges respond with a low drawn-out creak. The door opens. A narrow gap reveals darkness within. You stand there looking into it. And for the first time since the storm began to take everything else away, you feel the presence of a place that might hold you. Even if only for a little while, you do not rush inside. Even now, even after everything. You stand in the doorway, one hand still resting against the wood, your body angled slightly forward but not fully committed. The darkness within the building does not welcome you, but it does not resist either. It simply waits. Behind you, the storm continues its quiet work. Snow settles on your shoulders, your sleeves, the edges of your boots. The bell sounds again, faint now, almost folded into the distance. You can still hear it, but it no longer reaches you in the same way. It belongs to where you have been, not where you are. You take a breath, then step inside. The air changes immediately. Not warmer, not in any meaningful sense, but stiller. The wind no longer presses against you. The snow no longer lands directly on your face. The space feels enclosed, defined, held together by intention rather than chance. You close the door behind you. The sound is soft. Final. You stand still. Let your eyes adjust. The darkness is deeper here than in the smaller hut, but shapes begin to form slowly. A larger room, perhaps. The outline of a table, something like a chair. A wall that runs farther than the one you leaned against before. The space feels used, not recently, but not forgotten. You take a step forward, then another. Your boots sound different on the floor here, less hollow than before, more grounded. The structure feels sturdier, more deliberate in its construction. There is a subtle scent in the air. Not just wood, something else. Faint, warm once. You inhale slowly. Yes, smoke again, but stronger than in the hut. You move further in, drawn by that trace. Near the far wall you see it. A hearth. Larger than the one before. Stone-lined, darkened by use, the surface marked by layers of old ash. Above it the wall carries the stain of many fires, the wood discoloured in uneven patterns, where heat once rose and escaped. You approach carefully. Your legs feel heavy now, each step slower, more deliberate, but they carry you. You reach the hearth and crouch, slightly looking into it. Cold, empty, but real. You place your hand near the stones. They hold no warmth, only memory. There is a widely recognised fact in historical living conditions that larger rural homes or communal buildings often centred around a hearth. Not only for cooking, but for warmth, light and gathering. It was the heart of the space in every sense. Without it, the building was simply a shell. You look around again. This place was meant to hold life. People sat here, moved here, spoke here. Now it holds only you. You lower yourself slowly to the floor beside the hearth. The motion takes more effort than before. Your body resists not strongly, but enough to notice. You settle there, your back against the wall, your legs stretched slightly in front of you. The position feels final, not in a dramatic way, just settled. Your hands rest loosely at your sides. You look at them. They do not feel like much. They move, but without urgency. You flex your fingers. They respond, "That is enough." You lean your head back against a wall. Close your eyes for a moment. The darkness behind them feels complete now. The storm fades slightly in your awareness, though. You can still hear it faintly against the walls. The bell is almost gone, its rhythm too distant to follow clearly. Your thoughts drift, but gently. You think of the path you walked, the ash, the fading footprints, the trees, the frozen water, the animal that passed without noticing you, the bell that guided you, the huts, the fences. Each piece feels separate but also connected, like fragments of a story you did not realize you were part of. There is a lesser-known observation from studies of survival experiences. People often recall their journey not as a continuous line, but as a series of distinct moments, each carrying its own weight, its own clarity. The spaces between them blur, but the moments themselves remain. You understand that now. You open your eyes again. The room remains still. Unchanged. You are here. You have arrived somewhere. Not necessarily where you intended, but somewhere that holds you, even if only for now. You take a slow breath. Then another. The cold remains, but it feels quieter, more distant. Your body no longer fights it in the same way. Your thoughts slow. Your breathing softens. And the world, which had been so vast and uncertain, begins to narrow once more. Not into danger, but into something smaller, something manageable. You rest there. and the story begins to fade gently around you. The snow continues to fall outside, though you no longer follow its path. Each flake drifts downward with the same quiet patience, settling across the land, smoothing every edge, softening every trace of where you've been. The trees stand in their silent rows. The fences hold their quiet lines. The bell sways gently at sound, now little more than a memory carried through the air. Inside, the stillness deepens. Your breathing slows, steady and calm, rising and falling like something distant and familiar. The cold no longer presses with urgency. It simply exists as part of the world beyond your closed eyes. There is nothing more to decide. No direction to choose. No path to follow. Only this moment held gently in place. If you listen closely, you might imagine warmth returning not from fire, but from the quiet rhythm of rest itself. The kind that comes when movement is no longer needed, when the world outside can continue without you for a while. The storm will pass, the snow will settle, and somewhere beyond it all paths will reappear, softened but still there waiting for footsteps again. For now you remain still, quiet, safe enough. And as the last sounds of the storm fade into the distance, the world softens around you, easing gently into silence. Sweet dreams,